In 1990, game developer Origin Systems had a smash hit on their hands. Wing Commander, the 3D space combat simulator. They quickly set about making a follow-up, and I mean quickly. Wing Commander 2 was on store shelves less than a year later. The question is, though, is that really enough time to make a worthy successor? The first Wing Commander was the brainchild of game designer and programmer Chris Roberts. Even though the sequel introduces itself as a Chris Roberts game, the man himself had minimal involvement in its creation, having found himself promoted into the higher-level managerial position of Director of New Technologies, which appears to have primarily entailed acting as a producer for multiple new projects. He did still find time to get his hands dirty with some design and programming work, but instead of Wing Commander 2, he chose to do it for Strike Commander, a project that ended up so delayed and over budget, he later compared it to the infamously disastrous filming of Apocalypse Now. But that's no big deal. I'm sure it was just an isolated freak occurrence. The reins for Wing Commander 2 were handed to the director of the just-released Worlds of Ultima Savage Empire, who just so happened to also have plenty of familiarity with Wing Commander thanks to having worked on the game's impressive dogfighting AI, known today as Siobhan Beeman. Beeman, facing down what must have been an extremely tight schedule for a project of this size, decided that the second game was not going to rock the boat too hard in terms of technology or gameplay. Instead, the sequel would expand on the cinematic ambitions of the original. While the unprecedentedly elaborate animated cutscenes in that game captured the imagination of players at the time, they ultimately amounted to little more than an aesthetic flourish over an extremely bare-bones plot and set of characters. The plan for Wing Commander 2, then, was to use those cutscenes to actually deliver a story comparable to what you could get from a feature film. To that end, novelist and television writer Ellen Guan was hired to help deliver a screenplay. Yes, they literally call it that in the credits. That's how novel of a concept this was at the time. As for how all that turned out, well, that's what we're here for, so strap in. Before we hit the launch button though, I feel obligated to mention that this is part of a series of videos exploring the history of space sims. I didn't start with the second game, and you probably shouldn't either. I've already spoken at length about the first game, and I'm going to try to avoid repeating myself in favor of talking about what's different in the sequel. I'll try to throw new viewers a bone wherever it's expedient, but if you ever find yourself getting lost or feel like you're missing some context, that first video might just be the cure for what ails you. Alright, now that we've gone through our pre-flight check, let's get into it, shall we? After capping off their successful conquest of the Vega sector with the destruction of the Kilrathi Empire's starbase there, the crew of the Terran Confederation ship Tiger's Claw looks to repeat this feat in the Enigma sector, but things don't quite go according to plan.
I will speak with Prince Thrakarth alone. Guards, you are dismissed. Arise, grandson. How goes the war against the humans?
The Terran carrier Tiger's Claw tried to attack us here at Katithrak Mang, but my stealth fight has destroyed it, and soon we will demolish the rest of their fleet.
Speak of your plans, not of your toys. Tell me how you will defeat the Terrans.
Yes, my Emperor. Without the Tiger's Claw to defend them, we can crush the rebellion on Gorakar. And then my armada will sweep through the Enigma sector to attack the defenseless colonies.
And what of the human pilot who has caused us so much trouble?
Those fools blame him for the loss of the Tiger's Claw. He will never fly a fighter again.
Excellent. Without him, the Terrans cannot stand against us. Soon, Earth itself will be in our grasp.
I find the way they explicitly acknowledge that the player single-handedly carried the Vega campaign to victory in the first game to be extremely corny. Okay, granted, that is literally what happened, but you're not supposed to admit it. One thing to note is the fact that these guys are talking to each other out loud would have been quite something to behold in 1991. This was cutting-edge stuff at the time, and most of the people who played the game probably didn't even get to enjoy it because you needed an expensive Sound Blaster card in your computer and a separately installed voice pack upgrade. I don't think you would have been able to download this at the time. The World Wide Web had only just been made available to the public that year, so it would have had to have been distributed on floppy disks. And hold on a minute, did you have to pay for this? Move over, Horse Armor. There's a new original sin in town.
Without your flight recorder as evidence, the court couldn't convict you of anything but negligence. But I know the destruction of the Tiger's Claw was your fault, and I still believe that you're guilty of treason. Your ridiculous claims about a Kilrathi cloaking device.
It's true, sir. The Kilrathi have invisible fighters.
Enough! The court already demoted you to captain, and as far as I'm concerned, your career in the Navy is over. My secretary has already drawn up your resignation.
I'm not guilty, sir. I won't sign it.
Have it your way then, Captain. I have a request from in-system security for a veteran pilot. I'm transferring you to the security forces. You'll spend the rest of your career on a space station, and you'll be the ISS's problem, not mine. Now get out of here, and I hope we never meet again, traitor!
Khazra, what is happening on Gorakar?
The rebels have taken the planet, my lord.
How can these scum turn against their rightful lords? I cannot let them gain my stealth fighter technology. Launch a full spread of missiles directly into the Gorakar shipyards.
My lord, we will lose years of progress, and your plans for conquering the Terrans.
We'll have to wait. Launch the attack, Khazra. Then I will return to the palace and render an apology to the Emperor.
I hope you enjoyed these voice-acted cutscenes, because that's the last we'll be seeing of them for a while. Only a few key scenes got done up like this, so we'll be getting the silent treatment for most of them. I guess we're in the video game equivalent of the part-talkie era of cinema.
What's up?
You might even say we never left. One place where you thankfully can be sure all the dialogue will be voiced is in the cockpit, with all mid-mission dialogue coming through loud and clear.
They're attacking us, sir. Affirmative, Captain.
Getting to hear the taunts and chatter fly back and forth adds a surprising amount of life to the experience.
Time to die, human!
And the enemy death screams help make shooting them down extra satisfying. Makes it feel more personal.
You cannot defeat the Drakai!
Before we can begin our new life as a security guard, we need to enter our character's name or transfer a save file from the first game if we have one. The protagonist still didn't have a canon name at this point, only the internal nickname Blue Hair. But I'll be using my knowledge of the future to name him Christopher Maverick Blair. And with that, we're let loose into our quarters, the new main menu system for this game. It's the same basic idea from the first game of treating your living space like a point-and-click adventure game to access all the game functions, but a few things have changed. The most obvious one being that you're kind of confined to this one room. There's no bar this time, or at least not one you can go to at will. Instead, clicking on the rightmost door will play a story scene that could take place in any one of a number of different locations, in which your boy Maverick interacts with a multitude of different characters. You know, like a movie. So we've lost what little freedom to roam that we had, but Maverick has gained the ability to go places, talk to people other than Shot Glass and his wingmates, and sometimes even do things. A more than fair trade, I'd say. Without the bar, though, we do lose the scoreboard, which is a shame. The save menu does technically still keep track of your kills, and you can even preserve your kill count from a Wing Commander 1 save, but there's not much point to it when you don't have anyone else to compare to. You also won't be earning any medals or promotions, disgraced and sidelined as you are in this game. The story door just replays the intro we already saw for now, so let's head through the mission door to get to another cutscene? I think the idea is supposed to be that the scenes you get from the mission door are the equivalent of the briefings you would get from Colonel Halcyon before each mission in the first game, but the thing is, they've taken great pains to spice these up, to the point where they're basically indistinguishable from a regular cutscene. It's a good thing, but it does mean you've got this kind of awkward situation where every time you get to a new mission, you click on the right door to get half of the story, then click on the mission door to watch the other half before the mission starts. It's just a reminder of how new all of this was at the time. They were really stumbling around in the dark here, but luckily most of the problems they bumped into were relatively minor, all things considered. For our first mission, we open up on our new wingmate Shadow complaining to Maverick about how pointless and boring the patrol they're about to do is going to be. After all, no Kilrathi have been sighted within 20 parsecs. Well, it still pays, and Maverick is just happy he still gets to fly, so they hop into their ferrets and get on with it. The fundamental experience of flying in Wing Commander 2 is largely identical to how it was in the first game, outside of a few technical quirks that I think would be better saved for later. In terms of controls, both games have 3 officially supported ways to turn your ship. The first, and likely most commonly used way, is with the arrow keys on your keyboard. More of a fallback if you didn't have the 2 more expensive options than anything else. The obvious problem with the arrow keys is that they're a digital input with only 8 possible directions and 2 speeds, on or off. This leaves something to be desired in the area of precision, especially with the extremely fast turn speeds of most of the ships in these games. Not what you want in a game that values precise shooting. Personally, I wouldn't have played these games if this was my only option, but many people in my comments talked about how they played these games with only a keyboard or a D-pad and had a great time, so to each their own. You know what's funny? I don't think I got a single comment from anybody who claims to have played with a mouse. Now, this could be down to the fact that mice were not necessarily as ubiquitous in '91 as they are today, but I think there's more to it than that. The mouse controls are interesting. Instead of directly controlling your bearing like in a first-person shooter or X-Wing, you control a cursor, which your ship will follow. It's a surprisingly forward-thinking solution that deftly avoids the problem of having to pick up and move your mouse to the other side of your desk over and over again that the FBI-style schemes have. If this seems oddly familiar, it's because this is an early version of the control scheme that went on to be used by Freelancer with great success and picked up by many other games after that. It was here all along, but I don't think the version seen in this game was quite there yet. The biggest problem I have with it is how awkward it is to stop turning once you've pointed in your desired direction. With keys or a stick, all you have to do is let go and you'll stop turning immediately. But with the mouse, you need to move the cursor into a precise area in the center of the screen. It actually takes a conscious, precise effort just to stay still. Freelancer got around this by requiring you to hold a button to start turning, so all you had to do to stop was let go. No such luck here. Flying this way is uncomfortable. I'm not surprised that so few people seem to have taken to it, which leaves the third and final method. Joysticks, flight sticks, sticks, you know, like this. They are the intended way to play this game, after all. As you can see, this is a game about flying a craft controlled by a stick. The other control options are layers of abstraction over that, and that's what kept me from getting into these games at the time. I was interested, but the mouse and keyboard options just didn't do it for me. I thought to myself, maybe I need a stick, but I couldn't justify buying a peripheral that only works for one kind of game when I wasn't even really sure if I was going to like that kind of game. That's why the prospect of coming back to them using a dual analog gamepad seemed like a good compromise to me. Though it might not have as wide a range of motion as a full-size joystick, a thumbstick is still a stick, with the same fundamental properties. It offered a way to dip my toes into the genre, see if I could make it work for me in 2022. I wasn't sure if it was going to work, but I gave it a try, and it didn't just work, it worked great. Controlling the ship by stick immediately felt intuitive and fun. Hitting enemy ships was challenging, but achievable. By taking advantage of cording, I was able to have the entire control scheme at my fingertips in a way that was, if anything, more convenient than the original keyboard layouts. I ended up playing the whole series like this and had a blast. But some people weren't happy about that. If you actually care about these games and would like to see games like them come back into prominence, this should be great news. It means somebody who didn't grow up with these games can still play and enjoy them today. They have value that new players can access, even if they don't have a joystick, which, they wouldn't. Certainly not before they start playing them. It means there's a potential future, not just for the genre as a whole, but for these classic games themselves. Plus, I gotta say, a lot of the arguments against gamepads seem to have been made from assumption, not experience. Suffice to say, gamepads are not at a disadvantage when it comes to mapping all the functions required by these games to buttons. If anything, it's the other way around. I did see some people talk about how the default control scheme for X-Wing approximated the experience of frantically searching a huge control panel for the right button to avert disaster, as opposed to the more clinical feel of having it all at your fingertips, which I think is fair, but just doesn't speak to me personally. There was one comment that stood out though. David Wright made a very generous offer to help buy me a joystick, along with a genuinely convincing proposal. Wouldn't it at least be interesting to compare the experience of playing these games with a thumbstick to that of a hand stick? And you know what? Yeah, it totally would. I could chronicle my experience with it as part of this series, maybe clear some of those misconceptions up, and settle some arguments once and for all. And hey, maybe I'll come away from this a willing convert. Who knows? So, I did some research, and what I found was that flight sticks nowadays fall into one of two categories: budget and enthusiast, with nothing really in between. Most of the extreme high-end stuff is really more for people who get really into playing Microsoft Flight Simulator and DCS Warthog. But even the so-called mid-range, with features you would want for a space sim, starts at $150. The thing is though, if I was going to do this, I wanted to get something that does the format justice. I wanted a HOTAS, or hands-on throttle and stick setup. Having a physical slider that offers absolute one-to-one control over your ship's throttle seemed like a really cool feature that I would not want to miss out on. And you wouldn't want my introduction to flight sticks to be some pitiful, creaky thing that drifts all over the place. So, what we ended up settling on was putting our money together to get a Thrustmaster T16000M. It's a decent quality stick from a reputable brand that has all the most important features checked off, and a name that's not too embarrassing. Thanks, David. I'll do my best to uphold my part of the bargain, starting with Wing Commander 2. And the first thing that struck me about these things is their sheer size. If I'm to compare this to a gamepad, a very obvious difference is that you can't just casually pick these up and start playing with them. They don't fit on my desk when I'm not using them, so I gotta make room somewhere else. And when I do want to use them, I have to drag them onto my desk and plug them in. It's a commitment. The second thing that struck me is that you have to turn off Windows security features in order to install the drivers, which is its own sort of commitment, I suppose. I tried using Thrustmaster's Target software to make a config, but I found it very unwieldy and couldn't get the end result to actually work in a game. So instead I tried Joystick Gremlin, which I had heard was the tool du jour for people still using flight sticks in the 2020s. It's not the most user-friendly program in the world, but it's functional, and I was able to get a config up and running before long. Although I did need to unplug every other controller from my computer in order to get it working in DOSBox. More commitment. This is something I knew going in, but you may be disappointed to learn that the throttle is basically dead weight. Wing Commander 2 has no support for throttles whatsoever. You can't even hack it in with keyboard commands because there simply isn't any way to set your speed directly. It's a long-term investment, you'll see. With the buttons set up, I loaded up the first mission and gave it a shot. Then if we compare it to this footage of me playing with the gamepad from a week ago, the difference is immediately obvious. And if you guessed that this is the joystick footage, then congratulations, you're smarter than you look. I'm basically learning a new skill from scratch here. There was no way I was ever going to be as adept on my first try with the joystick as I am with the gamepad. At least we can use this as an opportunity to see that depending on where you are in the story, you can get different game over scenes. It looks like things do not go well for humanity if Maverick dies. Anyway, let's call this a work in progress. I'll keep at it. Besides, I couldn't have asked for a better environment to learn than the one this game gives you, starting with the first ship. The Ferret is the platonic ideal of a starter ship. As a patrol ship, it's considerably less decked out than even the most basic military craft we've flown in the past. Notice that there's only one video display unit in the cockpit, used to view your current target and communicate with your allies. We won't be needing a second one because the Ferret has no missiles or other ordnance to switch to, nor any guns other than the dual mass drivers it starts with. Mass drivers. If you've seen my video on the first game, I know what you're thinking, but it's okay. They fixed them. They're far less of an energy hog this time around, and they blow things up just fine. You might think removing missiles in the left VDU is a bit much. After all, the starter ship in the first game had both of those, and I didn't have any trouble learning to use it on the fly. But it's something I appreciate now. When you're learning a new control paradigm for the first time, as many of the people playing these games at the time must have been, it's very helpful to focus on one or two things at a time. If you perform a task that you have a lot of experience with, like, say, driving a car, you've probably mastered it to the point where you're not really actively thinking about it when you do it. Your brain has automated the task, so to speak, leaving your conscious mind free to think about other things or to deal with unexpected challenges as they come up. It can be easy to forget, then, that it wasn't always this way. When you're first learning to do something, and probably at least a few times after that, it's going to be the thing you're actively focused on, consuming your attention. And if something else comes up, even something superficially simple, like pressing a button to switch weapons, it's going to be disruptive. You're likely to have to stop what you were doing so you can focus on this second task, then spend a moment getting your bearings again after switching back. Once you've internalized the skill such that you can perform it without actively thinking about it, that frees you up to think about secondary actions while still performing the primary one. And only after you've learned those secondary actions to the point they too are second nature can you seamlessly combine them with the primary skill into what we call the cool shit. In eliminating as many complications as possible, the Ferret helped me focus on the fundamentals of turning my ship and shooting with minimal distractions. We can worry about all that other stuff later. But enough about our ship. Let's talk about the enemy ships found at the first nav point. The Sartha Light Fighter is basically this game's equivalent to Wing Commander 1's Salthi. They make a decent effort to avoid your shots, but they crumple almost immediately when you do manage to catch them, and their dual neutron guns do just enough damage that you can't ignore them, but not so much that you won't be okay as long as you veer off within a reasonable amount of time. They are, in other words, the perfect sparring partner for someone learning the controls for the first time. As for why it's not just a Salthi again, well, this is the first example known to me of that phenomenon peculiar to video game sequels, where the developers just can't leave well enough alone. And the assault rifle has 32 rounds instead of 60 now, but it's significantly more accurate. Plus, the artist redesigned the model, so let's call it the MA5C, not to be confused with the MA5D, or the MA37, or, well, you get the idea. It has been 10 years since the events of the first game, and the Salthi did have that whole inability to turn left thing, so I can see why they would want to replace it. Once you've dispatched the Sarthas, the next nav point puts you in an asteroid field, which works just like in the first game, unfortunately. I saw a lot of comments about using some moving back and forth technique to cheese the asteroid fields, but I could never get it to work as described until commenter Shiro Amakusa 8075 mentioned that you specifically have to pitch up and down while using the afterburners. This works because, as the trick reveals, the asteroids spawn in a horizontal band in front of you, so by always going above or below them, you can boost through without any danger. Wish I'd known that a little earlier. Oh well. I'm not actually that bummed out about it, because asteroid fields are nowhere near as much of a menace here as they were in the first game. It's not that they behave any differently, it's that they don't overstay their welcome. Although we are once again being introduced to them right off the bat, this is actually the last asteroid field we'll be seeing for quite a while. When they're an occasional bit of spice rather than a constant source of annoyance, I can almost grow to appreciate them. Almost. At the third nav point, a group of Drakri medium fighters are waiting for us. As you might be able to surmise from their forward wing design, these are this game's version of Wing Commander 1's Kilrathi. Compared to the Sarthas we just fought, they're a bit less maneuverable, but a little better armored and armed, with a triple laser cannon loadout. In retrospect, one criticism I have for the original game is that 3 of the 5 basic enemy types use the exact same dual laser cannon loadout, which led to a feeling of sameness when fighting them, so having them all shoot different types and amounts of projectiles at you is welcome. Once we've cleaned up the Drakris, it's time to come home to Carnarvon Station. Here we find that the process of docking has been simplified a bit. You still need to ask for permission to land, but you no longer have to line yourself up with the specific side of the ship you're landing on. You just get within a certain distance, and what they call the automated landing system does the rest. I personally didn't have any trouble with this mechanic after my first few brushes with it, but apparently this was a common pain point for new players, and considering how much of a mess the sprite-based renderer makes of large ships when you're close to them, I really can't blame anybody for having trouble with this. There's a lot of little improvements like this that add up. Speaking of improvements, here's another example of the more dynamic briefings and debriefings I was talking about. Instead of the standardized post-landing briefing, Maverick gives his mission report from space. The comms officer almost doesn't believe him because, although nobody told us, we've apparently been enjoying a ceasefire for the last 10 years. Well, not anymore. Them Catboys are at it again. Back on the station, Shadow reveals that, far from being happy that the mission turned out to be the opposite of boring, she's actually terrified and wishes she could be anywhere else right now. And I get it. If I signed up to be a security guard and ended up fighting a war, I wouldn't be too pleased either. Maverick points out that depending on how the war goes, we might all have to take up arms sooner or later. And besides, you don't want to just give up like those traitors in the Society of Mandarin, do you? This seems to be enough to convince her, so she goes off to fly an escort mission while Maverick mans the communication room, where he receives a distress call from the carrier ship Concordia, which is under attack but can't launch fighters due to a damaged hangar bay. In response, Maverick abandons his post to jump in a ferret and meet Shadow on the way back from her escort mission to save the Concordia. I mean, maybe it's fine. This guy seems to be okay with it. After rescuing the Concordia, we immediately land on it. I guess their hangar bay can receive fighters, but not launch them? But did you notice that we didn't even have to ask for permission this time? It just whisked us away into a mission-ending cutscene as soon as we destroyed the last enemy fighter. The way the cutscenes are implemented in this game can feel a little arbitrary. On multiple occasions, they'll introduce a mechanic where you do a thing, have you do it a few times, only to have Maverick automatically do it in a cutscene later on. And it's like, why not just let me do the thing, then play the rest of the cutscene afterwards? In this case, my best guess is that they were worried players might get confused and try to go back to Carnarvon Station instead of landing on the Concordia, but surely there are better ways to handle this. It's ultimately a minor issue, but it just goes to show that these were new problems. Nobody was thinking about ludonarrative dissonance or cutscene to gameplay ratio as an aesthetic rather than budgetary concern. On the deck of the Concordia, we're greeted by the Colonel, who turns out to be none other than Angel, who you may remember from the first game. After congratulating us, she invites Maverick to hang out with some of the other Tiger's Claw survivors in the rec room after hours. From left to right, starting after Angel, we have Spirit, who, in case you aren't picking up on the subtle messages the game is sending, is Japanese. This is important. Remember this for later. Doomsday, who is his usual charming self.
We're in trouble now. I know I won't survive this. I'm going to die any minute now. I hate it when you do that.
And Jazz on the piano at the end, who is even more of a charmer, if you catch my drift. Doomsday points out that we've almost got the whole surviving gang back together. We're just missing Paladin and Maniac. The next morning, we're tasked with escorting a pair of broadsword bombers to an enemy frothy cruiser, which they will destroy with torpedoes. Apparently, capital ship shielding technology has advanced in the last 10 years, and it's no longer possible to damage them without the use of these special torpedoes. Before we can launch, Stingray, one of the bomber pilots, makes it known that he refuses to fly with the Coward of K'tithrak Mang, and is grounded for his trouble. It seems like Maverick's reputation could be a problem going forward, but he's lucky to have friends like Angel on his side. As an introduction to escort missions, this is pretty chill, because unlike the ships you had to escort in the first game, these bombers are quite capable of taking care of themselves, so we're just here to support the operation rather than carrying the entire weight of it on our shoulders.
Nailed that capital ship.
Coming back to the Concordia from a successful capital ship kill, we're introduced to the ship's mechanic. I don't think I mentioned them in my first video, but they would make a comment on the state of your ship at the end of each mission, which was a fun little detail. The Concordia's mechanic still does that, but she's also an actual character now who goes by the handle Sparks, and serves as a mentor of sorts for our boy Maverick when he's feeling lost. Shadow, Angel, and Sparks all agree that Maverick should be on the Concordia flying real missions rather than playing security guard on Carnarvon, but doing so would require convincing the Admiral to allow it, which could be a problem. Regardless, all that paperwork and sweet-talking is going to take a while, and things seem to have calmed down on the Concordia, so it's time for Maverick to head back to Carnarvon, and time for me to drop a big old spoiler warning. If you haven't played Wing Commander 2 and want to experience the twists and turns of its story for yourself, now would be a good time to do so. This is the first game I've covered that has enough of a story that it would even make sense to do this. Could you imagine doing it for the first game? Where would you put it? Really, the only question posed by that game's story is, will the Terran Confederation conquer the Vega sector? So I guess you do it right at the very end? It turns out that, yes, they do. Or they don't, if you were on the losing path. I think you've had enough time to decide by now, so let's get back to it. The flight back to Carnarvon is uneventful, but wait, what's this? A mid-mission cutscene? Will wonders never cease? While they wait in line to dock, Shadow reaffirms that Maverick should transfer to the Concordia, and she almost wants to join him, but won't, because she's up for retirement in a month. Oh, Shadow. Why'd you have to go and say a thing like that? Meanwhile, a bomb goes off once again, disabling the flight deck of the Concordia, so we head back to defend her. After clearing out the attackers, this happens. Farewell, Shadow. We hardly knew you. After landing on the Concordia, we get to meet Admiral Tolwyn for the second time. Yep, this is the guy who pinned the Tiger's Claw disaster on Maverick and ruined his career 10 years ago. He's just as much of a fan now as he was then, and the feeling is mutual. Maverick bitches about how he and Shadow didn't get any fighter support, which Tolwyn justifies by saying they're going to jump out of the system in 15 minutes. And you can't launch fighters just before jumping. I'm pretty sure it says that in the rulebook somewhere. I thought they couldn't launch fighters, period? Because of the bomb? Well, anyway, they are leaving the system soon, so for the time being at least, Maverick is along for the ride.
What a fortuitous coincidence. In the Niven system, Spirit requests Maverick as her wingmate on a mission to investigate signs that the Kilrathis are about to attack a local colony, but is denied on Admiral No Fun Allowed's orders, which forbid him from flying combat missions. Instead, we'll have to settle for taking a lone broadsword bomber outfitted with a trace analyzer on a reconnaissance trip to look for signs of Kilrathi jump trails. Trust me, it's better this way. We can count ourselves quite lucky to get access to a ship this good this early in the game, so let's savor it while it lasts. The first thing you might notice about the broadsword is that it's quite slow, and that's before you realize it has no afterburners. Enemy fighters can waste your time playing keep away if they want to, and if they decide to retreat, you're not catching up to them. Not that that matters, I mean, you can't even get medals in this game. However, it's likely the triple mass drivers you're packing in the front will pulverize most of them before they even get the chance. Not only does it have a very respectable DPS, but you'll find aiming a lot easier than you're used to, because this is the first time we get access to the improved target tracking system, or ITS for short. Lock onto an enemy and you'll get a target cursor predicting where you need to shoot to intercept them at their current speed and course. Very helpful, as you might imagine. That said, it doesn't matter how much assistance you get if your target outturns you so much that you can't even get them on screen, which, when you're in a bomber, some of the more agile enemy fighters can do. That's where the turrets come in. Well, actually the turrets should come in all the time because they're disgustingly powerful if you know how to use them, but I'm explaining things in a digestible order, okay? My initial reaction to the turrets was one of disappointment, if you can believe it. That's because, despite Angel specifically mentioning that you supposedly have a crew operating these turrets, they do not shoot on their own. Or at least, you would think that, for all the evidence they give of their existence under normal circumstances. If you check the third-person view or pay close attention to the HUD, you can see that they do shoot, just very slowly, and they have trouble hitting anything unless you avoid turning, at which point you might as well just climb back there and do it yourself. Which, it turns out, is the key to unlocking their power. The only problem is, if you're controlling the turret, that leaves the helm empty, which would appear to be a pretty awkward proposition. In Wing Commander, your ability to veer away from enemy shots is your lifeline. Spend any significant amount of time flying in a straight line in the middle of a dogfight and you will die. At least, that's how it works with all the fighter class ships. Quite possibly the most important advantage that bombers get is shields and armor for days. It took a while for me to get used to the idea because it's such a different paradigm from what the series has been up to this point, but you actually can afford to tank the hits you're going to take during the time you spend leaving yourself exposed like this, as long as you make good use of that time. So what's so good about
assuming direct control
to make it worth the trouble? Turrets don't look all that great at first glance. They have a dual neutron gun configuration, which I believe I characterize as being pretty weak when the Sartha use them. However, when the player uses them, turret neutron guns have a much higher rate of fire than front-facing ones, giving them a surprisingly high DPS. Each turret has its own separately recharging weapon energy, so if you shoot your front guns dry, you can switch to a turret and blast away while they recharge, and vice versa. Unfortunately, turrets cannot take advantage of ITS, but if you're using them right, you won't need it. I keep saying turrets here, but I'm really just talking about the rear one. The left and right ones can go take a hike for all I care. They're of very limited use. So, what makes the rear one so special? Well, where do enemy fighters try to go when they've outmaneuvered you? Directly behind you. And what do they do once they're there? Line themselves up with you nice and steady to try to make their shot. So if you're waiting with a rapid-fire stream of hot neutron death, they're ripe for the picking. This is often the fastest way to take down enemy ships. Just keep an eye on your shields. Oh, and I guess there's that whole bombing part with the torpedoes and everything. That's pretty important. There's a lot to say about torpedoes, but if you'll remember, we're not even supposed to use them for this mission. If you couldn't tell from how long I've been talking about it, I really like the way bombers are handled in this game. In my X-Wing video, I praised that game for the way it differentiated its playable ships by giving them distinct advantages and disadvantages over each other. But this actually goes a step further and makes you use genuinely different tactics to fight depending on what kind of ship you have. Is it balanced? Hell no. There's no amount of speed or maneuverability a fighter can have that comes close to matching the toughness and firepower that you get with a bomber. They are delightfully OP. Given how much trouble some of the fighter missions gave me, I can't bring myself to feel too bad about it. Case in point, this mission introduces not one, but two very dangerous new enemy fighter types. Not that you'd know it from the way the broadsword styles on them. Yeah, see how you like it, you bastards! The Jalkehi is supposed to be a bomber, but for some reason it doesn't carry torpedoes? At least not according to the WC News Wiki anyway. From the way it looks and how it's kitted out, you'd think it was this game's version of Wing Commander 1's Grotha, but it's named as if it's succeeding the Jalti. Meanwhile, the Grikoth is named as if it's the new Grotha, but looks and acts more like the new Jalti. Not only were these two switched at birth, but they also fill very similar roles in this game. They're both heavily shielded and armored in exchange for being less maneuverable than a light or medium fighter. They both have powerful front guns and a complement of homing missiles, and they both have a dorsal turret with the same dual neutron loadout as ours, although thankfully with a much lower rate of fire. The Jalkehi has 4 laser cannons and 1 particle cannon in front, which is a new type of projectile that is basically a better laser. This brings to mind the Jalti's devastating and ear-rending 6 guns versus the Grikah's more conventional triple neutron gun. If I were designing these, I'd get rid of the Grikah's rear turret, but trade the Jalkehi's front guns with it, with maybe an extra particle cannon thrown in for that authentic Jalti flavor. That way they'd be differentiated a bit. Oh, and I'd also swap their names while I'm at it. Unfortunately, I left the keys to my time machine in my other pants, so the Grikoth and Jalkehi are basically the same fight. Granted, depending on the ship we're flying, it can be a tough fight, but as mentioned, the broadsword makes an absolute mockery of them. After returning from our peaceful reconnaissance mission, Maverick is introduced to Ralga over a game of cards. If that name sounds familiar, that's because it's the Kilrathi captain who defected to the Confederation during the events of Secret Missions 2. He now flies fighters against the Empire, and asks to be referred to by his call sign, Hobbs. We're also properly introduced to Stingray, who is just as much of an asshole now as he was before. It bothers me that nobody seems to have a clear idea of what it is that Maverick supposedly did at Kithrak Mang to deserve all this abuse. Everybody's annoyingly vague about it, but just specific enough to feel contradictory with one another. The way Stingray tells it, it sounds like Maverick lost his nerve and ran away from the Tiger's Claw when it needed to be defended. Meanwhile, Jazz talks more like it was simply a matter of failing to pilot well enough at a critical moment. Neither of these seem like they would rise to the level of traitor, which is the word Tolwyn repeatedly insists on using. That would suggest Maverick personally shot the missile that destroyed the Claw. Maybe the idea is that nobody knows what really happened, so everybody just fills in the blanks with their own imagination, but if that's the case, how can everybody be so sure of Maverick's guilt when they can't even come up with a shared story of what it is he supposedly did? It's a serious problem with the story, because Maverick's rock-bottom reputation is supposed to be the primary obstacle he has to overcome, and it's just not convincing to me. It doesn't come off as believable that the accusations could be so damaging to his reputation when they're this vague. Sometime later, Maverick is rushed into space in a lone ferret and learns he is tasked with delivering a communications packet to the Niven colony because they can't be reached due to sunspot activity. We're given a course that is supposed to avoid enemy patrols, but we run into a wing of Sartha, because of course we do. Just like our last non-combat mission. No big deal. However, back on the Concordia, somebody's been feeding information to the Kilrathi. And they just murdered a communications officer to cover their tracks. You know, given the accusations that have been flying around about Maverick, it's a good thing this happened while we have a rock-solid alibi. We get a different landing animation and even a new main menu room to reflect the fact that we're on a terrestrial colony instead of a spaceship, which is a nice touch. While waiting around, we meet Downtown, another Concordia pilot who mentions that he used to live on Gorakar, which is a Kilrathi colony that rebelled against the Empire. A good reminder that it's not just Hobbs. Maybe there's hope for peace after all. On the way back to the Concordia, we're tasked with escorting 2 freighters full of medical supplies to a jump point. This is the first real escort mission where you truly are solely responsible for keeping the target safe, and I struggle a little bit.
Requesting assistance, sir.
No!
The joystick is still holding me back. When escorting, you have to play a lot more proactively than normal. Stay aware of what's going on beyond just who's targeting your own ship, and use that to take control of the situation, which is hard to do when you're preoccupied with flying your ship. I make it through after a few tries though. We'll get there, eventually. Back on the Concordia, things are a little fraught. Command has reason to believe that the traitor who murdered Specialist MacGuffin... Specialist MacGuffin? Come on. Anyway, they have reason to believe that the traitor is a fighter pilot. So, if I'm understanding this right, one of the pilots on this spaceship is a killer. It could be anyone, and if we don't unmask this saboteur in disguise soon, they might kill again. Just thought I'd bring attention to this situation for no particular reason. In the next briefing, Jazz notes that Stingray has been removed from the flight roster, but we don't have time to think about that because we gotta deal with a bog standard patrol mission in the Gorakar system. Looks can be deceiving though, because the enemies we find on this patrol can't be identified by our targeting computer and vanish into thin air, or thin vacuum I guess. It's stealth fighters, just like the ones that torpedoed the Tiger's Claw in our career 10 years ago. Stealth fighters will cloak when you get them in your sights, then try to get behind you before decloaking to shoot, and repeat. This strategy makes them significantly less aggressive than other Kilrathi, and they sacrifice a lot in terms of firepower, shielding, and mobility to make room for the cloaking device. So I actually find these to be pretty easy to fight. Really, the only thing that makes them more dangerous than a Drakri is that they carry missiles. Maverick is stoked to finally have some vindication after all this time, but unfortunately his flight recorder was damaged, and for some reason it's absolutely inconceivable to the people in this game that something like a stealth fighter could exist in space, and not even Angel believes him. I don't know if the flight recorder is supposed to be the work of the traitor or an outrageously unlucky coincidence, because there's no evidence either way, but I choose to believe it's the traitor because that just seems hilariously petty. It's times like this that I wish they had made a Super Wing Commander 2 so we could have gotten this debriefing in that game's signature style. God damn it, Angel, I trust 5 of those ships.
Don't be ridiculous. Next you'll be telling me giant insects can fly.
Maverick is not happy about this, so he goes to stew at the bunks, where he meets an equally dejected Stingray, who reveals that the reason why he was removed from the flight roster is that the murdered technician had a pair of pilot's wings in his hand, and Stingray's wings were missing from his locker. Then he drops this line. You wouldn't understand how it feels to have people hating you for something you didn't even do. Are you fucking kidding me? Are you for real right now? Jesus Christ, you're an idiot. Well, that's what I would have said anyway. Maverick was a bit more diplomatic about it. Later that day, Maverick, who seems to have gotten out of his funk remarkably quickly, learns from Angel why the Enigma sector is so important. It has special jump points that can send a ship much farther than normal, granting a tremendous strategic advantage to whoever holds it. If the Kilrathi were to get their paws on it, they would be within striking distance of Earth, so no pressure. Before starting the next mission, we're introduced to our new wingmate. It's Hobbs. He starts by complaining that the mission isn't important or dangerous enough or something. Meanwhile, Maverick gets a little racist. Angel isn't having any of this crap and assigns them to fly rapiers as punishment. It's worded as if she's doing them a favor, but trust me, it's a punishment. Now you might be thinking, wait a minute, In the first game, the Rapier was the brand new, top-of-the-line, best-in-class ship. What happened? Well, I'll tell you what happened. 10 years went by, and it's not looking so hot anymore. Unlike most of the new ships, it has no its. But that's the least of its problems. She said the shields have been upgraded, but I beg to differ. They certainly don't feel any more protective, and I can't find any hard numbers either way. What I can measure objectively is the length of time it takes to regenerate them from empty, which is twice as long as it took in the first game at around 20 seconds. In my first video, I complained a lot about the scimitar and its mass drivers constantly running out of energy. Something I've come to realize since then is that while the mass drivers are the most power-hungry weapon, which certainly doesn't help, they're not the real problem. The thing is, when your shields are regenerating, the rate at which your weapon energy recharges is sharply reduced. So if it's just a given that your shields are going to be regenerating all the time because 20 seconds is an eternity in combat, you're going to run into trouble keeping your guns fed. The scimitar's shields took 18 seconds to regen, and that's the true reason why it sucked in Wing Commander 1, and the Rapier sucks here. Before we can start the mission, we have some business to take care of. Hobbs technically outranks us, but he doesn't think that should be the case. He's heard tales of our exploits since even before he defected, and he greatly respects us. Then he says, "I swear I'm not making this up. My first order is that you take command of this wing." "As you wish, Wing Commander." As you might have been able to guess from my comments on the Rapier, I had some trouble with this mission. Significantly more than I had with any of the previous ones, in fact. Enough so that after failing several times in a row, I decided to see what would happen if I tried using a gamepad. And I did about the same. We've gotten to the point where the joystick isn't an active detriment to my performance, at least. The problem here is that while the Rapier is arguably a better ship than the Ferret, it's not better enough to keep up with something like a Jalkehi. That dorsal turret really does a number on the Rapier. Just like when we were using it, the turret can easily hit you when you're trying to line up a shot. Then once you've taken a hit, now your shields are regenerating, which means it's going to take way longer to destroy them.
Which gives them that many more opportunities to hit you, and it just spirals from there.
This is where you theoretically could take advantage of the Newtonian light physics by pulling off what's called an afterburner slide, flinging yourself ahead of them while turning your ship to take shots as you pass by. However, this does not guarantee that they won't hit you anyway, and makes it way harder to hit them as you're doing it, which I'm having enough trouble with already. I've actually got a quote for this. "Unlike in the first game, enemy fighters now lead their targets with their guns, have more evasive maneuvers, and work much harder to try and attain a position on your tail." So yeah, they lead their shots now, which kind of undercuts the effectiveness of a maneuver that has you moving in a predictable direction. As for the rest, it's very hard to tell the difference as a player, which is unfortunately often the case with AI. Part of it is that a lot of the improvements involve maneuvers to stay behind their target, and it's tough to be cognizant of behaviors the AI is exhibiting when they're off screen. What I can be cognizant of, though, is the percentage of time that the AI spends on screen, which is to say, how successful they actually are at shaking me, and they aren't noticeably better at it than they were in the first game. Now, they aren't any worse at it, which still leaves them in a pretty good spot for the time, being much better at dogfighting than, say, the TIE fighters in 1993's X-Wing. Which leaves me in my current predicament, both outnumbered and outgunned by ships far superior to my own. As if that wasn't enough, this mission is also the first time you encounter an enemy ace. So just throw in a boss fight on top of everything else. Thanks a lot. But wait, shouldn't the game be showing me some leniency at this point? Because the quote goes on. The dynamic intelligence concept involved more than just upgrading the intelligence of the ships. In Wing Commander 2, the skill level of enemy pilots is adjusted according to the player's own skill level. The result, according to Beeman, is that the better you are as a pilot, the harder the dogfights will be to win. On the other hand, less experienced players will have an easier time. Dynamic intelligence creates an interesting effect, said the director. If you meet 8 enemies and manage to take out the first 7, the last ship's intelligence is increased by a few notches. Engaging the last ship results in a really tough dogfight. The dynamic difficulty system is one of the more intriguing aspects of this game to me, because very little information about it exists online. But by using debug commands, we can get at least some idea of how it works. If you start the game with the command line argument origin, you can, among other things, use keyboard shortcuts to raise and lower the dynamic intelligence level, and crucially, print what you just set it to on screen. Using these commands, we can see that dynamic intelligence starts at 5 and ranges from 0 to 10. It also appears to reset to the default value every time you start a mission, whether you loaded a save, started a new game, or even hit the retry button after failing. Since the only way to measure the DI level is to change it, it becomes kinda hard to say anything definitively beyond that. But from my observations, it seems like taking damage lowers it, while getting kills raises it. Then there's the question of what this number does. We know it has something to do with how the AI behaves, but what exactly? My first thought was that it might affect the number of Drakai pilots you run into, who, if you don't know, are elite warriors, smarter, braver, and more skilled than the average pilot, with a unique set of behaviors to match, mostly because that's how I would have done it. I don't think this is the case, however, because if we go back to what Beeman said, whatever DI governs is supposed to change within the context of a single battle. You kill 7 ships and then the last one is somehow smarter. It just doesn't make sense for a pilot's entire personality to change back and forth in the middle of a fight. Whatever it is has to be a bit more subtle than that. From what I could tell, enemies seem to shoot faster or more often at higher DI values, but this is subtle indeed, enough so that it could just be my imagination or random chance. Figuring out anything beyond that would probably require way more rigorous testing than I'm willing to do, or access to the source code. Which is all to say, whatever it's doing is barely noticeable if at all, and certainly nowhere near impactful enough to move the needle if you're struggling, like I am in my current predicament. After sleeping on it and trying several more times, I've finally managed to pull off a win by the skin of my teeth.
Avenge me, brothers!
By the way, if you give up after dying at this point in the story, you get a funeral just like in the first game. While talking to Sparks about how rough that last mission was, Maverick says that he's developed a begrudging respect for Hobbs. That didn't take long. A few more missions like that and we'll have solved racism. Maverick is naturally curious about what would drive Hobbs to defect, but not curious enough to just ask him. Instead of suggesting the obvious, Sparks recommends talking to Downtown about it, because he and Hobbs have a history, apparently. So Maverick tracks down Hobbs and uses the opportunity to ask why Hobbs requested Maverick as his wingmate, which, as it happens, is because as Hobbs' wingmate, Maverick can fly real combat missions. I mean, if those last few missions were supposed to be non-combat, you could have fooled me, but, you know, missions that are supposed to have combat. Clever. Then he pays a visit to Downtown, who is talking with Doomsday about the Society of Mandarins, the group of Kilrathi collaborators who the traitor almost certainly belongs to. In Downtown's words, the original Mandarins were continually invaded by the Mongols, but conquered the invaders by converting them to the Mandarin way of life, like achieving a culture victory in civilization. So, presumably these new Mandarins are looking to pull the same trick on the Kilrathi. At the last minute, Maverick remembers to ask Downtown the question, but he phrases it in a dickish way so he gets a defensive reaction instead of a real answer. Oh well, maybe next time. In the next mission briefing, we learn why Hobbs has been acting so insecure about the missions he's been getting. The Admiral keeps the kid gloves on when dealing with them due to his importance as a Kilrathi defector. This mission is to meet and escort a civilian freighter, which even Maverick is taken aback by, but he'd probably sing a different tune if he knew who was on it.
Good to see you again, laddie.
It's our old friend Paladin, who has retired and gone commercial.
Now the only Tiger's Claw survivor we've yet to reunite with is Maniac, who Paladin mentions has apparently stumbled backwards into becoming the golden boy of the Terran fleet, but that's a tale for another time. Before we even get a chance to wonder what Paladin's up to or why we were sent to meet him, it's revealed to us, but notably not to Maverick, that rumors of Paladin's retirement have been greatly exaggerated. While he no longer serves in a strictly official capacity, he now acts as a spy master of sorts, covertly assisting the Gorakar rebels in their resistance against the Empire, among other things. Speaking of Gorakar, it looks like the Empire is making a push to recapture it, starting with the Olympus space station, so it's up to us to stop the— Whoa! They attacked the Concordia in the middle of the briefing, so we gotta scramble and defend her before we do anything else. Then we need to meet up with the Clydesdale Minesweeper and defend it if necessary. It's not. Before its escorts come with us to help take out a minor capital ship. It goes down easy, especially with the added help. Now we finally get to what they've been teasing for the last few missions, the reason why Hobbs defected. He witnessed a slave about to be killed and decided he had to intervene. A human boy who grew up to be downtown. If you have to pick something as your bridge too far, slavery is not a bad one. Hobbs is a pretty cool dude as far as I'm concerned. On the way back to the Concordia, we've got to defend Olympus from another attack. These Jelkahi look like they're doing bombing runs, but if you'll remember, they don't have torpedoes, and I don't see any damage to the station. Upon getting back, we're treated to another voice-acted cutscene.
I have new orders for your squadron, Khazra. You are now assigned to a single task, the destruction of the Concordia.
Will you lead us into battle, cousin?
I cannot. The Emperor has ordered me to the Imperial Palace.
You are our finest warrior, my prince, but it's been many months since you led us into battle.
My grandfather will not allow.
Your grandfather is old and weak.
You speak treason, Khazra.
No, I speak to the next Emperor of Kilra. You are our future, Prince Thraka.
It will be many years before I attain the throne, cousin.
Perhaps not so long as that, my prince.
Despite the fact that Confederation ships are equipped with flight recorders that should be able to objectively prove what happened, Tolwyn and the military at large seem to be convinced that Hobbs saved Olympus Station single-handedly, which fits into a larger pattern of diminishing Maverick's accomplishments that is starting to wear on him. The Kilrathi have pulled out of the Gorakar system for reasons mysterious to the characters but known to us, which leaves the Concordia free to explore the nearby Novaya Kiev system, which has also been left mostly undefended, but with a few stragglers left behind for the seemingly easy picking. We're given a broadsword bomber and told to destroy a quote-unquote undefended supply depot alongside Doomsday, who will be our wingmate for this part of the game. I gotta say, Doomsday is really out of his element here. His whole shtick is cartoonishly exaggerated pessimism, but you could not have picked a more smooth-sailing, A-OK, milk-run batch of missions than this mid-game stretch you find him in. It must be excruciating for him. While the broadsword isn't fully new to us, this mission introduces 3 new things that it can do. The first is jumping. Most smaller ships don't have a jump drive, but the broadsword can travel long distance the same way we've seen capital ships do. The way it works is, you go to a predetermined jump point and press the jump button to travel to a different system in exchange for a bunch of fuel. The second thing is the broadsword's primary purpose, and it's a doozy. Launching torpedoes is the most controversial mechanic in this game, and with good reason. I don't fully fall on either side here, because I think there are good and bad aspects to it. After switching our ordnance to torpedoes and selecting our intended target, the torpedo will begin locking on, just as with any other kind of missile. Unlike other kinds of missiles, this process takes 20 seconds. You need to be looking directly at the target the entire time. If you turn away at any point, you will break the lock and have to start the whole process over. Once you've acquired the lock, you can fire the torpedo, but you probably shouldn't. Any target worth using a torpedo on has a flak gun that can shoot torpedoes down, so you're going to want to get as close as possible before launching to minimize the chance of that happening. Do it right and your torpedo will almost certainly land. Medium-sized ships like Kamix or those Kilrathi freighters can be destroyed with a single torpedo, but larger targets like the supply depot we're here for typically take 2. First, what I like about it. They clearly put a lot of effort into this. It even has its own theme song, which plays while the torpedo is locking on. This mechanic exists to address the unsatisfactory way that capital ships were handled in the first Wing Commander, which is something I raked that game over the coals for in my analysis of it. So I do think it is important for something to be done about it. One of the problems that irked me the most was how it destroyed the credibility of capital ships. Why even bother making these things if a single fighter ship can just casually waltz up and destroy them with minimal resistance? Making it so you need a specific type of ship with a special heavy weapon and making its use a pretty involved process goes a long way towards restoring that credibility, or building it up in the first place, I suppose. It's also a change of pace. The original game was sorely lacking in variety due to its extremely simple mission design, and torpedo runs, love them or hate them, are something different to do, which shouldn't be discounted. So that's the good. Now here's why a lot of people despise this mechanic. Let's talk about flak guns. In effect, what they do is constantly do little bits of damage to random sides of your ship as long as you're in range. These damage ticks appear to hit at semi-random intervals, which increase in frequency the closer you get. As for how it works under the hood, I don't know. Are the damage ticks applied arbitrarily, or are there explosion volumes out there that you could theoretically avoid? Well, the thing is, it actually doesn't matter, because if you'll remember, you have to be looking directly at the target from the moment you start to lock on to when you launch. Any attempt to veer off to avoid damage will break the lock and require you to start over. This means that for any given torpedo run, you will take a significant amount of damage, no matter what. Well, you might say that's what those heavy-duty bomber shields you sang the praises of earlier are for, and yes, that is what they do. But I neglected to mention that they have a very unfortunate weakness, and this is where it rears its ugly head. The trade-off for all that glorious protection bomber shields have is extremely slow regeneration. It takes about 90 seconds to go from empty to full. Remember, it takes 2 torpedoes to destroy the depot. So what do you do after your first successful launch? You get out of flak range and wait for up to 1.5 minutes for your shields to recover before you can do it again. And if you screw it up, like say you launch too early and the torpedo gets intercepted, or you misjudge the distance and end up getting too close before the lock is acquired, well, that's just one more time you need to make the walk of shame back to safety so you can sit in timeout for another 90 seconds. Of course, flak isn't the only source of damage in this game. Pretty much every mission involving a torpedo run is going to have you fighting at least one group of enemy fighters before you get to the target. Unlike the flak guns, it is at least possible to skillfully avoid that damage, but you're probably going to take at least some, and you'll have to wait for it to be regenerated before you can start your first run. In theory, the autopilot should help with this. The whole idea is that your ship is automatically traveling to its destination while we skip all of that through the magic of editing. So it's supposed to be simulating the passage of time. However, they just didn't think of that, so your shields and repair system will be in the same state they were in before you started your autopilot journey. No, my friend, you're going to have to sit through all of that in real time. Speaking of the repair system, what if your target tracking system or shield generator was damaged, or your torpedoes were destroyed? Well then, you can't do the torpedo run. Barely managing to scrape through a tough series of encounters only to arrive at my target and realize that my ship is literally incapable of finishing the mission has happened to me on more than one occasion, and it is very demoralizing. While all of this is pretty bad, it's not on the level of the docking and commuting problems that constantly plague X-Wing. Most of the missions in this game don't involve torpedo runs, which limits the damage, and even a good chunk of the ones that do have you in a ship without bomber-style shields. It's ultimately not a fatal flaw, it's just the principle of the thing. I lump so much praise on Wing Commander for its pacing, and deservedly so. For them to turn around and do this? Ugh, it just stings. At the end of the day though, you have to remember that they were trying to make the best of a bad situation. The central problem with capital ships in Wing Commander is that the sprite-based renderer just can't handle them up close, and there's no getting around that. Torpedo runs are a way to have you interact with them that at least doesn't feel broken. Could they have handled a few aspects of them better? Yes they could have. But if I had to choose between torpedoes and having this game handle capital ships the way the first game did, I'd take the torpedoes, warts and all. And then there's the third new mechanic. Once you've destroyed the depot, you can use the radio to ask this tanker ship for a mid-space refuel in case you don't have enough to jump back to where the Concordia is. I don't think they ever let you do it again after this mission, and from what I can tell, you're able to jump as long as your fuel level is anything above literally empty, so don't worry about it. While we were busy, Stingray's wingmate Dallas was killed in action as a result of some kind of computer virus attack, obviously the work of the traitor. This predictably leads to a lot of accusations flying around, but nobody has any concrete proof of anything, so we have no choice but to keep going as if nothing happened. And it looks like Stingray has gotten himself in trouble, so it's time to try out yet another new thing that bombers can do. Or it would be if we weren't ordered to retreat when we find out that a wing of Drakri and a Kamek are heading to Stingray's location. Maverick is not willing to accept this, so he pulls the old losing signal can't routine. I don't think they bought it, but we go anyway. One thing that confused me for a while is which ships actually require a torpedo to take down. They don't really specify in the dialogue or even the manual. It just says they're needed for capital ships and leaves it at that. But what counts as a capital ship? Torcathi are bigger than normal ships and show up as an orange dot on your radar rather than the usual red, so do they count? Nope. But they're freighters, not capital ships, so that makes sense. Kameks are supposed to be capital ships though, and yet you can still destroy them with regular weapons, and it's often more convenient to do it that way even though the manual mentions using torpedoes on them. The target display on your VDU would have been a good place to have some kind of indication, but nope. You just kinda have to guess or learn by rote what can be damaged without torpedoes and what can't. Once we've cleared out the enemies, we can rescue Stingray by switching to a turret and using the change weapons button to switch to a tractor beam, which can pull him into our cargo bay. Back on the Concordia, Tolwood chews us out, but in a way that suggests he tacitly approves of our actions and is just going through the motions for procedure's sake, judging by the way he just says, "Consider yourself reprimanded," without any accompanying lecture, then smiles. Rare Tolwood W if so. Stingray tries to thank Maverick for saving him, but it turns into an argument because of his inability to shut up about the Tiger's Claw and Maverick's increasing cynicism. Later, while hanging out in her quarters, Spirit brings up her fiancé who was captured by the Kilrathi 10 years ago, kinda out of nowhere. She used to fantasize about coming to his rescue, but as Maverick is quick to remind her, he's almost certainly dead by now. Our next mission is to destroy a Fralthra cruiser, which is one of the two capital ship types that actually do require torpedoes to damage. These have the potential to be a very different fight from what we're used to, but only if they're actively gunning for us. This one is traveling towards a specified point, so it's basically like fighting a starbase. We completed the mission with our escort intact and got 8 kills in the process, meanwhile Doomsday got none. So of course Tolwyn was unimpressed and doesn't plan to assign us to any more combat missions. After cards, Spirit takes Maverick aside to confide that she received an email from the traitor. What did it say? Well, wouldn't you like to know? I mean, you could probably figure it out. They haven't exactly been subtle with their foreshadowing, but Maverick can't. And that means, in a pattern that has become well worn by this point, we get to be strung along over the next few missions, being drip-fed one piece of information at a time until he finally gets it. Next mission, we're diverted from our patrol to go rescue a courier in a nearby system. Whatever happened to no combat missions, huh? We come out of the jump just as the courier's ship is exploding, and they eject a communications capsule. Among the ships that blew her up is a Ralatha-class destroyer. I don't think the game actually expects you to fight it, but using the tractor beam is kind of finicky, and I'd rather not have to do it while being shot at, so why not? Ralathas are basically identical to Fralthras in terms of their capabilities, but this one distinguishes itself from the Fralthra in the last mission by actively trying to fight us, which means it turns to face us and fires its antimatter guns. Considering that we can't turn to dodge them without breaking our torpedo lock, these are potentially a problem. Thankfully, the broadsword shields can take one volley, provided they're fully charged. So, 2 recharging sessions and 2 torpedoes later, we can return, capsule in hand.
Finally decided to earn your pay, eh?
Yeah, for once. The capsule has something to do with Spirit. Tolwyn just blurts this out right in front of Maverick, a man who, if we're to take him at his word, he believes is a traitor, because he's good at his job. And just like that, she's off the flight roster, prompting exactly the kind of speculation you might expect. Not for long though, because by the next mission she's already back on the roster and paired with us for a patrol in Epes. The Epee is kinda just a better ferret. Technically, it has half the armor, making it more of a glass cannon variant, I guess. Other than that, it has better guns, and missiles. I don't really have much to say about it, because the game doesn't either. You fly it in a grand total of 3 missions, one of which is on the failure path. I actually forgot it was even in here until I looked over my footage while writing the script. After a successful patrol, Angel lets us know why Spirit was taken off the roster and immediately put back on. The capsule contained a message from the traitor saying that, despite coercion, Spirit refused to betray the Confederation. Gee, I wonder what they were using to coerce her. Tolwyn thinks it might be some kind of reverse psychology ploy, because of course he does. God damn, this guy sucks. The next mission is to escort a convoy and then investigate an unknown area, which turns out to have Jalkehi in it, which is a little much for our Epes to handle. Luckily for us, Jazz randomly decided to show up, even though he's not supposed to be here.
Goodbye, my friend.
Harmonize on this, furball.
Which helps take the pressure off. And just in case you were wondering if Jazz could figure out a way to bring up the Tiger's Claw in the course of Maverick thanking him for last mission's save, never doubt the Maestro. Spirit isn't feeling well for some reason, so we fly a solo mission to escort a freighter full of missiles to be used on an upcoming raid on the Heaven's Gate starbase. On the way to the freighter, we encounter stealth fighters again. But when synchronizing our autopilot with the freighter, we need to turn our flight recorder off because it's causing interference. What an unfortunate coincidence. Spirit finally tells Maverick what you probably figured out ages ago. Her fiancé is being held hostage on Heaven's Gate, but has been condemned to a slow, painful death since she refused to cooperate with the traitor. Or maybe a quick, explosive one, considering we're about to launch an attack on that base. Maverick wants to call the attack off, but Spirit makes him promise to keep his mouth shut while she
deals with it in her own way.
I wonder what she meant by that. Well, I'm sure it's nothing to worry about. The traitor, who we're apparently calling the Mandarin now, has leaked information about the planned attack on Heaven's Gate to the Kilrathi, so they're sending a strike fleet to intercept the Concordia. Everybody else has been sent to take out that fleet, leaving Maverick and Spirit to fly a bombing mission on Heaven's Gate, which has been left mostly undefended. Amazing strategic planning by the cats there, just incredible. Now, the only reasonable thing to do in this situation would be to tell Angel that Spirit is in no way fit to participate in this mission. But she made him pinky swear. His hands are tied. They don't even think to mention it in the briefing, but this mission is our introduction to the final ship. Later, Epee, I've already forgotten you again. The Saber Heavy Fighter is, in essence, a hybrid between a fighter and a bomber. It can launch torpedoes and has a rear turret just like a bomber, but it also has the afterburners and general maneuverability of a fighter. I absolutely despise this thing. It's a terrible fighter. The problem is the obnoxiously wide spread on its guns. It's kind of like my beef with the X-Wing, actually. Due to the way combat works in Wing Commander, it ends up being so much worse, though. Bad as those wingtip lasers are, you still only need to land 2 shots to destroy a TIE. Wing Commander ships can take a lot more punishment than that. Normally, the way you get around this is by hitting them with all 4 of your projectiles at once, which can make up the difference very quickly. When they're this spread apart though, it is straight up spatially impossible to land all of them unless you're basically touching your target. Not being able to reliably do this leads to a catastrophic loss of DPS and leaves you chasing the enemy fighters around for ages, which is both not very fun and very bad for your health. Okay, so the front guns are a bust. What about the turret? Well, remember, if you're in the turret, you're not flying your ship. This is okay when you have the broadsword's hefty shields and armor, but not so much when you're in a paper-thin fighter. Every time you get in the turret, you're rolling the dice. Sometimes it works out okay, sometimes it doesn't. However, it's the only decent DPS option the Saber has, so I find myself using it a lot anyway, with variable results. It may not surprise you to learn that the Saber also sucks at being a bomber. First of all, it typically comes with 2 torpedoes, which is less than my preferred number of torpedoes, considering that leaves you with literally no room for error. Then there's the matter of those very weak fighter-style shields. While I don't enjoy waiting for them to recharge, I can still appreciate the bomber-style shield's ability to hold up under fire, particularly flak fire, which, if you'll remember, cannot be avoided. When you do a bombing run with a Saber, it is very likely that both your shields and armor will be penetrated and some of your systems will be damaged. Better hope it wasn't anything you needed for your second run. Theoretically, the afterburners should help in this situation. The faster you can move, the less time you have to spend in the flak AoE. Unfortunately, it's hamstrung by the fact that you have to face the target the entire time. Because you're boosting directly at it, you need to slow down relatively early in your approach or risk having your momentum carry you into it. It's still helpful, particularly when moving away from your target before starting the second run, but nowhere near enough to make up for the reduced defense. We don't need to worry about any of that for this mission though, because what Spirit meant by dealing with this her own way was this. What were the 3 things that Hollywood writers in the early 90s knew about Japan? Honor, duty, and kamikaze. I will wait for you in heaven. Oh, I see. So it's like she flew through Heaven's Gate. Later, in Angel's office, she and Maverick share a kiss. Or their stunt doubles do anyway. I have trouble taking this romance seriously. Yeah, shared trauma leads to an emotional bond, whatever. The problem is that there hasn't been a single speck of romantic tension between these two until now. You called it Heaven's Gate? But the best you could come up with for the romance was this one scene with Paladin? It's fine once it gets going, but it really does appear to just come out of nowhere. Sometime later, rumors have been getting around, so to avoid the image of impropriety, Angel is making sure not to assign us to the cool, important missions, opting instead to have us do standard patrols in a rapier with Stingray. It's not all bad, though. During the patrol, we just so happen to run into Paladin again, who is back from whatever clandestine nonsense it is that he gets up to these days. We learn over a game of cards that he and Hobbs have a history on Gorak Kar, which makes sense based on what we've learned about both of them so far. I like the sight gag of Hobbs grabbing his cards, but shouldn't his paw be way bigger than that? The next mission is to destroy 2 transports loaded with troops, which is actually kind of a tall order for 2 rapiers. The game acknowledges this, and through that, we learn that Angel's decisions on where to put Maverick may have less to do with image and more to do with keeping him away from danger. I'm pretty sure this kind of thing is exactly why romantic relationships between officers are frowned upon in real-life militaries. Stingray tells Maverick, kind of unprompted, that he had it all wrong about Hobbs. Cats are friends, not foes, or at least they can be. When they wasted Goddard Colony, all I could think was that they're evil. So, destroying a city-sized colony is enough to qualify someone as particularly evil, huh? Not even like a whole planet or anything. Interesting. I find this moment of character development, Stingray's big moment, really, unsatisfactory. First of all, is Stingray really the one who should be having this particular realization? He has been shown to have beef with Hobbs throughout the game, but really all of the worst stuff has been said by this guy right here. If anybody needs to have a big moment of growth with regards to not being a massive bigot, it's Maverick. Stingray's biggest flaw, and if we're being real, entire character, is that he's this ignorant dickhead who constantly needles Maverick about the Tiger's Claw because he doesn't know any better, thus totally differentiating him from Jazz, a smug dickhead who constantly brings out the Tiger's Claw even though he almost certainly does know better. Stingray's function in the story is to drive home to players that it's not just Tolwyn who hates Maverick. Everybody other than his friends thinks he's a massive fuck-up. Stingray does this in nearly every scene he has a speaking role in, so if there was anything that he needed to improve about himself, surely it's this? It almost seems like a missed opportunity to inform Maverick's character, like if he were to witness Stingray get over his prejudice about the coward of Katithrak Mang, maybe Maverick could reevaluate how he treats Hobbs. This stuff practically writes itself, but no, instead it's just, well, he flies a spaceship real good, so I guess he can't be all that bad of a guy. It also bothers me that what we're really seeing here is the aftermath of Stingray's big transformation. See, this game's whole thing is that it's trying to be like a film, and in films, they typically arrange things so that there can be this big crystallizing moment where the character's experiences come together to build a realization that the audience could witness and get some catharsis out of. Instead, we just get to watch him destroy his former mindset with facts and logic. And yeah, okay, those things did happen, so it makes sense that he was able to come to this conclusion. But since we didn't get to see his reaction to those things, well, that's great for Stingray, but if we don't get our catharsis and it doesn't have any impact on the other characters, it's not really adding to the story, is it? That's just bad filmmaking.
I did not summon you, grandson, but I know what you want. You wish to fight the humans.
My lord, you have ordered me to remain here. But how can I prove myself if I do not lead warriors into battle? Khazra and my cousins shame me with their glory and honors.
Khazra. I have heard enough of Khazra. Your father sought glory, as Khazra does. His ambitions led to his fatal accident.
Such accidents are very common in our family.
Your father destroyed the humans at Goddard, but his quest for glory cost us an entire strike fleet. Such failures are unacceptable in an admiral or an heir. You may go to war, grandson. And as for Khazra, he shall face the Concordia pilots, where he may find the glory that he seeks. But if you fail me, as I expect Khazra will, one of your 15 cousins shall be the heir to Kilra.
We once again get to send the Bonnie Heather off to a jump point, but on the way back we run into a strike fleet including 2 Frolthras. Without torpedoes, we can't do much about them, so we're told to deal with the fighters and then run.
You cannot defeat me.
Turns out this is Khosra's fleet that we just heard about, and the cat himself is flying one of the Chalkehis.
Damn you, human.
With the fighters dealt with, the Concordia launches some broadswords to deal with the cap ships, and the day is saved. After having learned his lesson about Hobbs, Stingray has served his purpose, and has for the most part exited from the story, but don't worry, Jazz is here to pick up the slack. The briefing for the next mission gets interrupted by another strike fleet heading our way, so we fly cover for the TCS William Tell as it destroys the Relatha heading the fleet, and the Concordia prepares to retreat to a nearby system. Whatever happened to not launching fighters when you're about to make a jump? I like it when the thing I'm escorting is actually capable of holding its own to at least some extent. There's a whole spectrum of variation between no interaction required and this thing will disintegrate if you don't personally intercept every single stray laser blast. The original game's escort missions tended to be pegged pretty hard to the latter side of the spectrum, but the designers of the sequel seem to have realized that it doesn't always have to be that way, and I found the objectives in it a lot less frustrating overall as a result. Despite our best efforts, things are not going well. Downtown was killed by 10 Drakri. 10 at once? Yeah, that'll do it. Hobbs is not taking it well. Jazz relates it to the death of his brother, a Marine on Goddard Colony who died because, in his words, the reinforcements were late. The William Tell, which went to jump out in a different direction in order to draw some fire off of us, didn't make it, so the Concordia is now completely isolated and being pursued by enemy fighters. In order to escape, they're going to try performing a risky double jump maneuver, which is one of those things sci-fi stories always try to present as a last resort, but somehow never seem to actually go wrong in any significant way, this time included. We're low on pilots, so Angel will be flying with us, and we're back in broadswords, thank God, doing a pretty standard mission to destroy a Kamek and some fighters to clear the way for the Concordia. So, in the Enigma system, not to be confused with the Enigma sector, which we are also in right now, the Concordia hides in an asteroid field to conduct repairs. They aren't telling the pilots much, but Jazz mentions that the communications room is under extremely tight security. They probably should have been doing that since the murder, if not before, but oh well, better late than never. We get a mission to destroy a listening post after taking a circuitous route to avoid revealing the Concordia's position, which mainly involves spending a lot of time in asteroid fields. I like the asteroids in the takeoff and landing cutscenes, that's a nice touch.
Farewell, mon
Another dead ape.
Angel's ship was destroyed during the course of the mission, which is something that actually happens a lot with wingmates, but you may have noticed that the Concordia isn't a ghost town, and that is because wingmate permadeath is not a thing in this game. Whenever a wingmate ship is destroyed, they automatically eject. I guess they just disabled that feature on Maverick's ship as a joke. I know some people really liked the permadeath for the dynamism it provided, but it just didn't do anything for me. Wingmate death was just another fail state among too many as far as I was concerned, so I'm glad to see it gone. Normally when a wingmate bails out, you get this cutscene where they tell you to move on because search and rescue will find the pilot. This time though, I remembered that mission to rescue Stingray and it got me thinking, can I? And yes, you can. And the debriefing takes it into account. Legitimately cool detail. Now that the repairs have been completed, it's time to go on the offensive, starting by going after a strike fleet headed by a Relatha. However, we need to resist the temptation to destroy it right away, instead letting it jump away, so we can track where it goes and hopefully find K'tithrak Mang, which they apparently didn't know how to get to? Not sure what's going on there. Evidently, Maverick wasn't paying attention to the briefing because he's all, "Damn, they got away," before Angel reminds him that we were supposed to let that happen. We follow the Relatha, then destroy it, and the mission just ends there. It's not like a cliffhanger or anything, it just cuts out the part where you return to base, which is fine, I guess, but why now after so many missions that had you returning manually? Well, anyway, this is it. K'tithrak Mang. It's time to do what the Tiger's Claw failed to do 10 years ago and reclaim Maverick's honor. Before we go after the base itself, though, we need to do some house cleaning, destroying any ships that may have detected us so we can maintain the element of surprise. We get paired with Jazz to take out a destroyer and its fighter escort. One of the small improvements that I really appreciate is that when you die, instead of having to load your save and start the mission again, you get taken to this screen, which lets you click retry to get right back into the action. It's kind of crazy how little time it takes after death before you're shooting at something again. Like, this kind of thing was treated as a revelation when Super Meat Boy did it. X-Wing has a retry button, but it's nowhere near as impactful. When you're going to have to wait 3 minutes before the Imperials even arrive, and then another full minute before you can even reach each other, the menus were never going to be a significant part of the equation. You know, X-Wing has this reputation of being an extremely hard game, but it's really not. It has some unintuitive aspects that I suspect are what were tripping people up, but in terms of technical skill and on-the-fly decision-making, it's not asking all that much of you. I played all of the missions in that game, including the expansion content, and outside of a rough learning curve and the 2 outlier missions I covered in my video, which, surprise surprise, came down to unintuitive design, I just kinda cruised through that game with relatively little resistance. I bring this up as a point of comparison because Wing Commander 1 and 2 get hard. Really hard. It's a very good thing that these games are able to get you back into the action so quickly, because on missions like this, I find myself dying, and 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 dying. Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I got here. Well, in my Wing Commander 1 video, I talked about how the difficulty of an encounter is extremely dependent on the number of ships attacking you at once. I believe it went exactly like this. Every additional enemy you add is an exponential increase to the difficulty of the encounter. If 2 is no big deal, 3 is a real fight, 4 is dangerous, 5 is crazy. I think you see where I'm going with this. 5 Jalkahi at the same time is, and I quote, crazy. If it were 5 Sartha or Drakri, it would still be crazy, but there would at least be a chance you could destroy one of them in your opening salvo, and then it would only be dangerous. Jalkahi are not the kind of ship you can destroy in an opening salvo. This encounter would be an extremely tall order at the best of times, flying the best of ships. We are not flying the best of ships. The most dangerous thing about the Saber is that the developers think it's good. They think they're doing us a favor, giving us this kick-ass ship to end the game with. On paper, it is good. It just has a couple critical flaws that really undermine everything that's supposed to be good about it. And nowhere is the dichotomy between what the developers thought the Saber was capable of and what it's actually capable of more clear than this mission. Well, okay, there is one other mission, but that's not even in the base game. The thing that really pushes this encounter over the edge, though, is the fact that Jalkahi carry missiles. I didn't really talk about avoiding enemy missiles in my Wing Commander 1 video, and that's because I didn't pay them much mind. This was for 2 reasons. The first is that the game doesn't do a very good job of letting you know that a missile's on your tail. The 2 things you get are this very quiet sound effect of a missile being launched, and this warning light. It's not nothing, but when you're focusing on multiple other things in a hectic dogfight, it can be pretty easy to miss. It also wasn't helped by me playing the Kilrathi Saga version, which made all the other sound effects way louder, but kept the missile sound just as quiet. At first, I chalked up the lack of a missile alarm sound to technology. When you could barely handle playing 2 sound effects at the same time, a sound that plays non-stop just isn't in the cards, right? That was before I remembered this. Clearly they can do it. This is an extremely niche situation though. It's very rare to have your ship take enough damage to play this alarm sound, but not enough to destroy it outright. They should have used this sound for when a missile is tracking you, or made another one. Alarms are good. There's a reason why they're used in real planes. Anyway, the other reason why I didn't pay attention to missiles is that the game didn't really punish me all that much for it. They only did enough damage to take out the shields of a raptor or rapier, so if you just flew defensively for a bit, you could come out of it without any lasting damage. In Wing Commander 2, that same missile will take out your shields and a chunk of your armor. And if you didn't have any armor, say because of a previous missile hit, then you're dead. Clearly, ignoring them is not going to work this time. So, how do we deal with missiles now that they're important? I had someone suggest using the music as a guide, since there is a track specifically for this situation, but this doesn't work. When the conditions arise for a specific track, there's usually a delay of multiple seconds before it starts playing, while the music system waits for a pre-specified branch point in the current track.
You're typically not going to hear it unless you've already taken evasive action in the first place.
No, for me, it really is a matter of straining my ears for that launch sound. It helps that I'm playing the DOS version this time. And then I glance over at the warning light every so often just to be sure. So you've noticed a missile. Now what? The most obvious option, new to this game and found on a few ships, including the Saber, is chaff pods. These work great when the game lets you use them, which is unfortunately not guaranteed. The first problem is that you get 2 of them, which is, in my experience, not enough. More importantly though, even when you have one ready, sometimes you'll press the button and nothing happens, with predictable results. This is actually not specific to the chaff, but rather a property of all secondary weapons. Sometimes the game just won't let you fire them. This is most noticeable right after firing a missile. It seems like you can't fire another one for a little while afterwards. So, a cooldown period, that's fair enough, but sometimes you'll be rocket blocked even when you haven't launched anything recently. My best guess at what's happening here is that there's a limit to the number of objects that can be in space at one time, and if the game thinks there are too many, it'll prevent you from launching any ordnance. Unfortunately, there's no indication of whether you can launch or not. You just have to press the button and hope for the best, which when we're talking about the kind of life or death situation that launching chaff represents, is obviously not good enough. So you're out of chaff, or the game just won't let you launch it. What do? Well, the most reliable technique that I was able to find is to maneuver yourself such that the missile, which shows up as a yellow dot on your radar, stays in this middle section. If successful, it means the missile is either flying parallel to you or has flown perpendicularly past you, which in either case means not towards you. This is similar to a technique used by real-life fighter pilots known as beaming. Under ideal circumstances, this actually works pretty reliably, although not 100% of the time. Unfortunately, circumstances are often not ideal. Avoiding a single missile from a single enemy fighter is all well and good, but try doing it with multiple other fighters all taking potshots at you. It gets worse if they decide to launch their own missiles. If 4 of them launch at once, which somehow can happen despite the object limit, you might as well just hit the eject button if you can even reach it in time. Other times, they'll string you along, one missile at a time. So as soon as you're done evading one, there's another one, and another one, and another one. Jalkehi carry 4 claw IRs, so in an encounter with 5 of them, that is potentially up to 20 missiles coming your way. Your chances of survival depend on a frankly unacceptable amount of RNG in when or if each enemy fighter decides to use their missiles. In an ideal world where these games could do a better job of alerting you to a missile lock and provide reliable ways to avoid them, I would agree with the decision to make them more powerful. But since we don't live in that world, I think the first game had it right. So I grinded away, flying my damnedest while hoping for good missile RNG, and eventually I made it to the second part of the mission, where I'm supposed to destroy a Relatha. And that's when I realized that I only have one torpedo. The other one was destroyed in the fighting. Not only that, but my target tracking is destroyed, so I can't even lock on to launch that one torpedo. Jazz is of course long gone, so the mission is incompletable. In retrospect, I probably should have just accepted this and moved on to the failure track. The mission structure is scaled down compared to the original game, with only a main path and a losing path that serves as a second chance to get back on the main path. However, I'm stubborn, so I kept trying, and after many more attempts, I made it to the Relatha with a fully functional ship, didn't screw up the torpedo runs, and made it home in one piece. And then this happened. That went by in a matter of milliseconds, so let me break it down for you. I clicked on the save computer, the game defaulted the mouse cursor to being over the load button, then in the very next frame, the same mouse click opened the load menu. The game doesn't ask for confirmation to load, and I was very tired at this point, so I didn't notice anything was wrong until it was too late. And one click was all it took to destroy my progress. That is extremely bad menu design no matter how you slice it, but it isn't helped by the fact that the GOG release defaults to emulating a faster CPU than the game was designed to run on. So heads up, if you're gonna play the DOS version of this game, make sure you set the cycle to something like 6000 for optimal menuing. Something must have rubbed off on me after all that, though, because I jumped back in and was able to do it after only 2 additional tries. One last step before we can launch the final assault. We need to clear the asteroid field of enemy ships, which turn out to be stealth fighters. I'll gladly take those over Jalkehi anytime, and Maverick is extremely pumped because with a working flight recorder and Jazz to corroborate, he can finally prove they exist. While debriefing with Angel, Jazz lets slip that he knows something that a pilot of his rank shouldn't. Yeah, Jazz is the Mandarin. Not only that, but he's the one who stole Maverick's flight recorder all those years ago. Angel manages to disarm him, but he escapes and steals a ship, so it's up to us to stop him before he can warn K'tithrak Mang.
So you think you can beat me, Maestro?
Luckily for us, the ship he chose to steal was a Saber, so it's kind of a duel of incompetence. Taking him down is just a matter of time with our awful guns.
Not bad, but this isn't over yet.
And he's left begging for his life. Maverick has no intention of sparing him, but makes the mistake of pausing for a one-liner, which gives Angel enough time to swoop in and capture him. I guess they just didn't have enough time to make a scene in the brig, but I love the idea that they still let him play the piano because he's just that good. Now that that's out of the way, it's finally time to attack Just kidding. Tolwyn wants us to fly another patrol while someone else does the real work. Maverick has had quite enough of this crap and decides to take matters into his own hands. My god, he's gone Maverick! With the dry, cerebral military drama resolved, the only thing left is anime. Sure, let's go AWOL so we can duel the Prince of Kilrathi in front of his massive space base.
Prince Thrakath challenges you.
No! Then single-handedly blow it up and return a hero. Why not? I talk about how challenging this mission is, and it is a fair bit, but nothing really compares to that 5 Jalkehi encounter from before. I will say that the mission starts you off flying through an asteroid field to get to your destination, which got annoying after a while, so I decided to try something. The autopilot is just skipping the process of you traveling in a straight line to your destination, so if you move to the side a little bit so the asteroid field is no longer in your way, you should hopefully be able to skip it. And what do you know? It works. Pro tip if you're following along at home. Oh, and the ending you get if you fail is pretty hilariously tragic. A common sentiment that I've seen online is that Jazz's motivations are nonsensical to the point of ruining the story, but I don't agree. I mean, I don't find them compelling, but they aren't nonsensical. So, Jazz's brother was on Goddard Colony, the one that got blown up as the inciting event of Secret Missions 1. The Tiger's Claw was supposed to be there to protect it, but got diverted to chase down a troop transport. If you'll remember, Goddard was done in by a brand new superweapon that nobody in the Confederation even knew about, so who knows if the Tiger's Claw could have done anything about it had it been there. But even leaving that aside, why blame the people who were supposed to stop the act and not the ones who actually did it? Well, for one thing, it's too late to get revenge against the literal perpetrators. Maverick already killed them. That leaves the Kilrathi Empire as a whole. That's a bit more of an abstract target, though. You can't look into the Kilrathi Empire's eyes and say you wanted them to know it was you who did it. Besides, no one man can stand against an empire. Well, almost no one man anyway. If Jazz wants to achieve his goal of petty, personal revenge, he needs to get a little creative with his targets. If the perpetrators aren't available, then he'll have to settle for the people who maybe could have stopped it. It's incredibly selfish, but then Jazz has shown himself, and will continue to show himself, to be an incredibly selfish guy. I wish I could say that I agree with Jazz's detractors that no real human being would act so illogically, but unfortunately I find this willingness to settle, to misattribute blame for one's problems to innocent bystanders for no real reason other than that it's easier to hurt them, to be all too familiar. Hell, you might even say Wing Commander 4 elaborates on this concept. But we can talk about that when we come to it. Many of the game's characters have been harmed in some way by the Kilrathi Empire, and they all responded differently. Jazz, who lost his brother, turned around and visited similar harm on whoever was nearby for his own gratification. Spirit, who lost her fiancé, gave up on life. Perhaps it's because he banded together with Angel, who has her own scars to bear, that Maverick was able to fight back for real and accomplish what he did. And Hobbs, who lost downtown, the reason why he took up arms against the Empire in the first place? Well, he didn't really get his big moment, did he? I suppose he was instrumental in getting Maverick where he needed to be, but I feel like he deserved a little better than that. I certainly wouldn't have minded having him along for the final mission. Maybe a dramatic cutscene where he lures a strike fleet away from you or something? Anything? Oh well. So Jazz makes sense as a character, but is he a good villain? No. His motivations may be understandable, but they aren't relatable in the slightest. He's not really fun to hate either though, especially since most of his worst deeds are done off-screen. To be fair to the guy, he's not supposed to be carrying the whole game on his back the way he kinda ends up doing. I jokingly nodded to the idea of this game having two different stories in one, but it's true, and each one has its own antagonist. There's the sort of dry mystery thriller of Maverick wading through a military that hates him to uncover a traitor and regain his lost honor, culminating in a confrontation with Jazz. And then there's the fun, lighthearted adventure about saving the galaxy from space cats, ending with our duel against Prince Thrakoth. It doesn't culminate in that duel, mind, because it's kind of hard to build a relationship, antagonistic or otherwise, with someone you've never interacted with before. For this reason, despite having by far the most audibly spoken lines of anyone in the game, Thrakoth ends up being a bit of a bust. Actions speak louder than words, and Thrakoth's actions are all in the form of large-scale fleet movements, which as a lowly pilot on the outs with upper command are way above our pay grade. I just don't feel like I know the guy. As a rival pilot who interacts with us all the time, Jazz fills the void, but he's just not interesting enough to carry the whole story by himself. Maybe if they had developed him some more, but they couldn't really do that since focusing too much on him would have spoiled the mystery. Wing Commander 2's screenplay stands out to me as being remarkably more ambitious than most video game stories I'm familiar with. You've got multiple intersecting character arcs that all try to play into an overarching theme about overwhelming hardship and how you deal with it. All the things found in movies that you don't typically see in video games. All of the ingredients are there, but most of them feel kinda underdone. Many of the character arcs seem incomplete. I already mentioned Hobbs. Angel has this whole thing where she struggles to maintain both the perception and the reality of remaining objective while being in command of Maverick, which doesn't really go anywhere. Then there's Tolwyn, a guy who has seemingly never known a day of hardship in his life, who just completely fails to understand the damaged pilots under his command. Seems like there's a potential for an interesting conflict between him and Maverick, and they've got one simmering throughout the whole game, but it never boils over into anything interesting. It's easy to imagine the third act of Wing Commander 2, the movie, where Maverick, who has a better reason to steal a ship and go to K'tithrak Mang than, "I wanted to be the one who did it," gets caught and has to justify himself to Tolwyn, which would be the perfect time for Angel to show up and put her reputation on the line to convince the Admiral to do the right thing, or at least distract him or something. Not to say that's how things should have gone, rather that the story invites this kind of speculation by feeling so incomplete. Not in the sense that there are hanging plot threads, but character threads that just don't pay off. Or in cases like Stingray, they do pay off but skip the build-up, so it ends up feeling poorly motivated. Downtown represents one of the few complete arcs in the sense that they pay off what they set up for him, which is not as impressive as it might seem, considering that the point of his character appears to be to have a tragic backstory involving slavery and then die for the purpose of serving as motivation for another character. In fairness to the writers, we do have evidence, in the form of some early documents outlining story and character ideas, that they at some point intended for him to be a full-fledged wingmate, with presumably more going on in his life. Then again, what we got is what survived triage, which is a good indicator of what's ultimately considered essential to a character's role and what isn't. Still, those documents are interesting. They differ from the final game in some pretty significant ways, with several characters and scenarios that didn't make it, including a branch point that would have allowed you to either kill Jazz or spare him in exchange for a flight recorder disc proving Maverick's innocence. There were also going to be additional scenes in the intro showing that Maverick had replaced Colonel Halcyon as the captain of the Tiger's Claw, which would have made the accusations leveled at him a lot less absurd. It actually does make at least some sense to pin the blame on him if he was supposed to be the one responsible for the Tiger's Claw and her crew's safety, rather than him just being a regular pilot as anyone playing the game without this information would assume. While it's possible that some of these cuts were made for pacing or other intentional reasons, it's far more likely that most of them were a result of the production realities of making a video game within a certain time frame under a certain budget. The thing is, this happens with every big video game. The only difference here is that we have the early drafts to prove it. For example, in the draft, Stingray's racism subplot that fell flat for me makes use of an entirely different character, Iceman, a returning pilot from the first game. Iceman was known for his deep-seated hatred of the Kilrathi, so it makes a lot of sense for the character. As opposed to Stingray, who goes out of his way to antagonize Hobbs because, question mark? They never really fill in the blanks of why this guy in particular would have more of a problem with Hobbs than anyone else. Even if they did, they'd be fighting an uphill battle because as a new character who makes an ass of himself at every opportunity, we have zero reason to care what Stingray thinks. Meanwhile, thanks to camaraderie shared over the events of the first game, the opinions of someone like Iceman are a lot more likely to carry weight in the minds of both Maverick and the player. Speaking of Maverick, he was going to be a bit more involved in the proceedings, with him and Iceman egging each other on into eventually accusing Hobbs of being the traitor, which would have been good because it performs the slightly important step of relating all of this to the protagonist in his journey in some way. It all gets resolved when Iceman and Hobbs have a fist fight, then talk out their differences and form a bond while stuck next to each other in sickbay. This newfound respect then rubs off on Maverick, who comes to visit them. In the final game, you do hear about Hobbs and Stingray's fight in passing, but nothing about the aftermath. Then sometime later, you get the seemingly unrelated event of Stingray's revelation, except this Maverick already changed his mind about Hobbs like 2 weeks ago after flying one mission with him, so the whole thing seems pointless. See what I mean? What was once a tightly intertwined sequence of events all contributing to the same purpose is now a disconnected series of things that happened to no discernible end. If you've ever wondered why video game stories have such a bad reputation, one reason could be that this kind of shifting sands environment can be very destructive to any kind of advanced storytelling. Character A needs to have a scene with character B that happens before their scenes in level 2 and 3 in order to imbue them with a specific meaning. Only character B no longer exists or is now only referred to in dialogue. Level 2 has been cut for time and level 3 needs to swap places with level 4 because it plays too similarly to level 1. The writers can rearrange the plot to hopefully end up with a story that holds together from a purely logical perspective, as Wing Commander 2 does. For the most part anyway. There's a lot of messiness related to the flight deck bombs, but it's ultimately inconsequential. However, the complex chain of events that needs to happen to specific characters in a specific sequence in order to give the story meaning is far more difficult to preserve and so becomes irreparably damaged in the process. Works in every storytelling medium end up having to make cuts like this, but only video games have so many other priorities that come before the story itself. So you get setups that don't pay off. Payoffs that weren't set up, and people wonder why character A even exists or what the story is supposed to be about. In a way, this helps me understand why video game stories, even ones that were written by professional writers, often seem so unambitious. In an environment like this, where all your best laid plans are destined to go astray, it makes sense to lower your sights a little. Try to nail one basic character arc, and call it a victory if you can even manage that. A movie isn't just a script made manifest, though. How it's presented is equally important, if not more so. Video games too. So how about those graphics, huh? During missions, the technology used to render the ships looks like it's pretty much the same as in the original game, but the pre-rendered sprites themselves look significantly more colorful, and the Kilrathi ships in particular were made with a clearer design language, ensuring that they looked like they were all made by the same culture using the same technology, where their ships in the original could look like a bit of a hodgepodge at times. It's subtle, but I'd call it an improvement overall. Outside of missions is where the non-subtle improvements can be found. Comparing them side by side, the characters in the sequel actually look a smidge less detailed to my eye, but it's more than understandable given the astronomical increase in not just the number of them, but the situations and places they find themselves in. Of course, even though it was undoubtedly one of the highest budget games ever at the time it was produced, looking back at it from 2024, it can't help feeling extremely quaint. If we were to keep going with the movie thing, let's just say there's a whole lot of shot reverse shot going on. Like, a lot. They throw the occasional wide shot in there to spice things up, but the fact of the matter is, an overwhelming majority of the cutscenes in this game are about people standing around in static poses while engaging in casual conversation. You could say that the gameplay is the action scenes, and sure, but even dialogue scenes need a little movement. You do get stuff like Sparks repairing a ship as she talks to you, and Jazz playing the piano, which are nice to see, but that's kinda it. Unless you want to count stuff like this. Okay, I suppose there's also the rotoscope scenes on the extremely rare occasions they show up. They look great, but are pretty limited in what they can depict since they're always showing the characters in silhouette, which they have to do to prevent them from looking weird, as evidenced by the few times they don't do that. I don't know how it was perceived at the time, but to me, today, Wing Commander 2 appears to be a game that wears its limitations on its sleeve. It's kind of hard not to see how it's all put together. The same few character portraits reused again and again over the same few backgrounds, endlessly yapping at each other. The thing we still have today that it reminds me of the most is a visual novel. To be fair, it's the most dynamic one of those you've ever seen. Normally, you don't even get reverse shots or wide shots. It's just shot. The characters also have animated mouth movements that actually match what they're saying on screen. The first game had this too, I just didn't mention it, but I should have because it's kind of amazing. Also, like visual novels, and unlike just about any other game at the time, the characters are able to emote while delivering their lines, so Maverick could furrow his brow, go bug-eyed, or crack a weird Agent York smile where appropriate. It's all very impressive, considering it was less than a year of work from like 10 guys in 1992, while they were all probably also moonlighting at multiple other Origin projects at the same time. Because that's what a big budget for a video game got you back then. Which is all to say, matching a feature film was maybe more of an aspirational goal than a real one. But the cutscenes get the ideas across and have their charms, to be sure. By the way, Dennis Loubet, who drew the cockpits and backgrounds for Wing Commander 1 and 2, posted a comment on my video for the first game with some fascinating anecdotes about his experience working on it. It's the pinned comment and a thread, so check it out if you haven't already. I didn't reply at the time because I don't know, I couldn't think of anything to say that someone else hadn't already, and then the longer you go without replying, the more awkward it becomes to... Well, anyway, Dennis, if you're watching, thanks for the comment, and for your work on the games, of course. Okay, that's enough about things we can see. How about a little something for those of you who treat these videos like a podcast? Let's talk music. The soundtrack is pretty familiar, mostly because it's literally the same tracks from the first game, but with some additions. The expanded focus on storytelling calls for new tracks to set different moods during cutscenes. Jazz and Thrakoth each get their own unique theme when you fight them, which helps emphasize their importance. I don't have a problem with the reuse of the old music. There's no need to fix what ain't broke, after all. If anything, my problem is the overuse of some of the new tracks, leading to a sense of monotony. This new combat theme in particular is my enemy. Not because of the theme itself, it's pretty good actually, but it's a bit distinctive, isn't it? It kind of reminds me of Starwolf's theme, something you'd break out for a special encounter with a particularly nasty bad guy. Now try to imagine this playing for 90% of the game's encounters. The old combat and intense combat themes are technically still in there, but you almost never hear them. It just seems like a waste of the variety that already exists in the soundtrack. Joystick check-in. That whole thing kind of faded into the background, didn't it? But it's fitting, because by this point, I was no longer actively thinking about the joystick while playing. I was just using it. Well, I've beaten the base game. That should be enough to answer the question in contention here. Is a joystick better for playing this game than a gamepad? And after having played it both ways, I can say with confidence that at least when it comes to the DOS version, it isn't. The advantage that a joystick has over a gamepad is that the wider range of motion it offers versus that of a thumbstick should allow for more precision while aiming. I put emphasis on should there because in this game it doesn't. Certainly not in the DOS version, which is what I've been playing. When I first got the joystick working in-game, I thought I was going to need to adjust the dead zone, but no, that's just how the game is. And it doesn't stop at the dead zone. It's okay. You see the really coarse way this mouse cursor moves? How it visibly snaps from position to position? The way that looks is how it feels to control a ship in this game. This very literal lack of precision has the effect of papering over the differences between input devices. It doesn't matter how big your stick is. We're all in the same boat. Then there's a subjective element. If you care a lot about immersion, well, a full-size stick is what Maverick is using on screen. Otherwise, it's just a matter of what you're comfortable with. In my case, the feeling of controlling my ship with an analog stick is essential to my enjoyment of these games. I'm just not overly concerned with the size of that stick. Of course, that's not the case for everyone. It was funny seeing comments seething at the idea of someone playing without a joystick, sitting next to people recounting how they played with a keyboard or D-pad and had a blast. The correct way to play these games is whatever works best for you. There is one way to increase the precision, but it's a bit of a Faustian bargain. It's time for ports and versions. Unlike the first game, which saw ports to everything under the sun, for whatever reason, Wing Commander 2 had comparatively few versions. Starting with the original 1991 DOS release, which is what you've seen in the video up to now. There are two main reasons why I made that decision. The first is that this game represents a significant technical refinement over the first one. That game was expected to run at around 7 frames per second and would go into fast forward if your CPU was able to run it any faster, which makes it a nightmare to run on modern computers, even with DOSBox. Wing Commander 2 fixes this problem with a 12 FPS limit. Now, that's not great, even when compared to, say, Doom's 35 FPS limit, but it beats the hell out of 7. And it means that you can just slap it in DOSBox, which the people selling it today have helpfully done for you, and play it. No tinkering required. That's not to say there's no tinkering you can do. If you want the best music, you'll want to upgrade to DOSBox staging with an MT32 ROM file. And I gotta say, now that I've had a chance to hear it in its optimal form, in context, I think it's a little better than the Kilrathi Saga OST. With the original's unambiguously electronic sound comparing favorably to the latter's somewhat muffled quality due to compression and occasionally cheap-sounding synthetic instruments. In a similar vein, now that I've had a chance to experience the original sound effects alongside an actually playable game, I can see the argument for them being superior to the Kilrathi Saga versions. While they don't sound anywhere near as close to what they're supposed to represent, they're a lot less grating on the ear. Some of the KS sounds, the laser sound especially, were really loud for no good reason and turned most dogfights into obnoxious cacophonies. The DOS sounds, by comparison, are all equally quiet, making for an experience that is, at the very least, more aesthetically pleasing. One very nice upgrade over the original game is that we now have positional audio, so if someone shoots at us from our left, we'll hear it from the left speaker, which is quite helpful for getting your bearings in combat, and something I can't believe they didn't brag about on the back of the box. I did get the occasional crash, but they always happened at the exact moment my ship was destroyed, so they never resulted in lost progress at least. Overall, it's a much better put together package than the DOS version of the original game, and arguably the best way to play it today. The only place it let me down is with the aforementioned imprecise flight controls. I also brought those up when talking about the DOS version of Wing Commander 1, and yeah, from what I could tell, they didn't change this at all between games. Developed as a joint venture between Origin and Japanese computer giant Fujitsu, a port to Fujitsu's own FM Towns computer series was released for the Japanese market in 1995. These things ran on an OS based on DOS, so porting the game wouldn't have been much of a struggle. The first change you might notice is the use of a CD soundtrack. Don't get your hopes up for some alternative reorchestration though. It's more of a high-end rendering of the MIDI tunes, which probably would have been a useful thing to do back then, but nowadays it compares unfavorably to what you can get out of an MT32 emulator. Now, you'd think that a CD-based soundtrack would mean having to give up the game's dynamic music system like it did for X-Wing, but no, apparently it's not a problem. Another difference I noticed is that this version uses digitized sound effects, but different ones than the Kilrathi Saga version. Instead, they sound more like the ones from Wing Commander Privateer. Oh, and also like in Privateer, space is black now. As you might expect, the game's text has been localized to Japanese, but they went the extra mile and gave it a dub too. The actors sound like they're giving it their all, but they're let down a bit by terrible audio mixing. That could just be the emulator I'm using though. I'm also going to blame the mouse and keyboard controls being virtually unusable on the emulator. At least I hope it's the emulator's fault, for the sake of anybody who paid for this back in the day. The FM Towns was discontinued soon after, and Fujitsu would move on to the much more lucrative business of ruining the lives of postmasters in the UK. Also in 1995, there were plans to release a Super Nintendo port, developed in-house by Origin. More than plans, actually. They finished the game and even sent copies to reviewers, but cancelled it at the last second before mass production for what were apparently financial reasons, according to project director Billy Kane in an interview with WCNews.com. At least I think that's where it's from. They don't mention a source. Cartridges were expensive to manufacture, especially the high-capacity ones this game would have required, and Nintendo, which had a monopoly on their production, would overcharge by an outrageous amount and refuse to entertain smaller orders. 95 was getting into the waning years of the SNES's lifespan, so it was likely deemed too much of a risk and shelved. According to the reviews, the game played about as well as you could possibly expect it to given the hardware, and Billy Kane talked about preserving all of the cutscenes, which, again, talking about the Super Nintendo here, would have been quite a feat. They even added some new features, like the ability to turn off cockpits like in the Kilrathi Saga, and full-color video messages. Unfortunately, nobody leaked it, and so it remains lost media to this day despite being highly sought after by the Wing Commander community. Billy finishes his interview by coyly stating that he does know where the prototype cartridge is, which I'm going to take to mean that Electronic Arts, which bought and eventually gutted Origin before parading its corpse around as the name of its digital distribution platform for several years, could release the ROM at any time and simply chooses not to. Finally, in 1996, we have our old friend, the Kilrathi Saga, which, if you didn't know, is a collection of Wings Commander 1 through 3 ported to Windows 95, once again by Origin themselves. The porting process introduced a number of bugs and missing features, plus as Windows 95 games, they're basically non-functional on current OSs. Thankfully, a very cool individual who goes by Beckon made the WCDX mod for the first two games, which gets them up and running on Windows 11, fixes bugs, and restores features. It's good enough that I recommended, and still recommend, the Kilrathi Saga version of the first game with WCDX as the best way to play that game today. I can't say the same thing for the second game. There are a lot of issues affecting both games, but even more are exclusive to 2, like animations and cutscenes playing way too fast, or cockpit damage not being implemented, or lack of directional audio. The first game didn't have it, so sure, whatever, but it should be there for 2. One of the biggest disappointments for me is actually not a downgrade from the DOS version, but from the Kilrathi Saga version of the first game. The 12 FPS limit inherited from DOS Wing Commander 2, which is half of KS1's much more comfortable 24 FPS. I have a theory about how this came to be. When porting the 2 games, the first one was naturally going to need more attention. It was going to need a frame limiter to be playable on then current computers, but since they were implementing it from scratch, they had free rein to pick whatever limit they wanted, so they went with the standard set by the then current release and obvious star of the collection, Wing Commander 3, which just so happened to be 24 FPS. When porting the second game, well, it already had a frame limiter, so why fix what isn't broken, right? But wait, there's more! If base Wing Commander 2 was starved for attention, take a wild guess what happened to its expansion packs. Secret Operations 1 and 2 are even more broken, with random crashes, the occasional garbled cutscene, missing music in some scenes, weird sprite artifacts in some missions, and deranged AI. It's a huge mess, and although it makes a valiant effort, WCDX can only go so far in cleaning it up. There is one single way in which this version is inarguably better than the DOS one though, and that is the flight controls. They are far more precise than in the DOS version, and when you're in-game, controlling your ship with a stick, they feel good. This feeling of smoothness, of precision, combined with the satisfying shooting mechanics are the reason why I kept playing the first game instead of putting it down after the first 5 minutes. It's ironic, then, that part of what drew me into this series wasn't even present in the original versions. It doesn't feel quite as good in 2, owing to that 12 FPS limit, but the precision still shines through. It's not all sunshine and rainbows on the input front though. When I tried using my joystick gremlin control scheme, I noticed that actions which involve pressing and holding a keyboard button didn't work properly in the Kilrathi Saga. For some reason, it relies on the operating system determined key repeat rate, like it's a word processor or something. I didn't notice this before because held actions in the DOS version worked like you'd expect them to, and the program I use to remap gamepads is Rewazd, which accurately models this detail when emulating keystrokes. Most input remappers, like say Steam Input or Joystick Gremlin, do not. You can try to get around this using autofire, but it doesn't quite work right for most actions. Luckily, it does work for afterburners, and you can use joystick button 1 as a workaround for the fire button, although that does cause issues if you try to take that control scheme back to the DOS version, which doesn't respond well to combining keyboard and joystick input. This leaves the keyboard roll buttons as the one thing you just can't really do anything about. The only alternative is to use the joystick method of rolling, which involves using a modifier button to replace turning left and right with rolling, along with other side effects like changing pitching up and down into a throttle control and turning your fire button into the missile button. It's a whole thing, and it annoys me enough that I just don't want to deal with doing it that way. Luckily, rolling isn't ever required to play the game. You know, I was watching my friend play some Batman the other day, and it got me thinking. I had come to regard these awful, sloppy ports that do a disservice to the original as a trend that started with the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 generation. But that's not really true, is it? As products like the Kilrathi Saga show, it's been with us all along. The only thing that's changed is the introduction of the term remaster and HD before it. It's always the same story. New hardware rolls around, and someone gets it into their head that they can make some easy money by porting an old game and sprucing it up a little. But they drastically underestimate the amount of effort required to do it right. They could put more time and resources into fixing it, but the whole reason why they decided to do it in the first place was that they thought it would be cheap. So they push it out the door as an unfinished mess and hope nobody notices. Isn't it comforting to know we've learned nothing in 30 years? If you're looking to buy Wing Commander 2 in 2024 and beyond, it's available on GOG and the EA app. So, GOG. It works well enough out of the box, but for the optimal experience, you'll want to replace the ancient version of DOSBox they have with DOSBox staging along with an MT32 old ROM, and set the game to use Roland Sound using the installer. If, despite everything, you want to check out the Kilrathi Saga, too bad. It's not being sold anywhere digitally, and the physical release had a tiny print run, making it pretty hard to get used. This wasn't a problem for the first game because it was given away on a PC Gamer demo disc, and WCNews.com managed to get permission to host it, so it's still available there today. Unfortunately, only the first game was given away like this, making 2 and 3 much harder to get. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you this is some insurmountable barrier, but it is one more issue to throw on the pile for the Kilrathi Saga. It's understandable that EA would opt for the DOS version when releasing the game on current platforms, because the computers of today can't run the Kilrathi Saga without the relatively recent development of WCDX, while they can run DOSBox no problem. It would make for a nice extra though. Just saying, in case there's anyone at EA who still knows what Wing Commander even is. But should you buy Wing Commander 2? Well, it's fundamentally very similar to the first game, so what did I say about that? It's extremely basic, lacking in variety and spectacle compared to later games, and suffers from some inherent awkwardness due to its sprite-based renderer. It also doesn't really have any story to speak of. On the other hand, it's impressively friendly and playable for its age, and features excellent combat that feels great and is noticeably deeper and more challenging than its contemporaries. If we return our gaze to the sequel, all of those things are still true, except for the one about the story. Whatever you think about its quality as a story in the abstract, I think you'll be hard-pressed to say that it isn't good enough to be a game story, to at least serve as the accompaniment to gameplay that we've come to expect from games today. So if that's what was holding you back from trying out the first game, I recommend giving the sequel a try. If it's the other issues that were giving you pause, well, all of them have been worked on to some degree, they're still fundamentally what they are. Other ships are still represented by 2D sprites, and the mission scripting system is still very limited in what it can do. Wing Commander 2 is still probably not for you. But if you played and enjoyed the first game, but for some reason didn't get around to the second one, then what are you waiting for? Go play it now! Right after you drop a like, comment, and subscribe, of course. Don't pull a muscle or anything. Oh, and there's the Patreon. How could I forget? You can vote on which game I cover next, and if you are one of those fine folks who already subscribed at Captain Tier or higher, what you're probably thinking right now is, wait a minute, didn't we vote to have this guy cover the Special Operations campaigns as part of this video? And yeah, you did, but hold on, I can explain. You'll get a video about those very soon, and not soon like you've come to expect from this channel, like actually soon. As such, the poll for what I do next will remain open until that video is about to come out. Of course, the real reason to subscribe is to support the creation of more videos like this, and with that support comes recognition, like the heroes you can see on screen right now. And I'd like to give an extra special thanks to the majors out there, such as Aaron Clark, Jomenthan, Justin Talbot, Regular Casanova, Danielle Currington, Alarmed Response, and Puke Skywalker, formerly 410,757,864,530 gay cops. Okay, now that all the casuals have clicked off the video, only the real ones remain. And I think all you real ones deserve some real talk. There's really only one thing to say about this video, and it's...
That took too long!
And I'm sorry about that. I think I lucked out a bit with the timing of when my first video blew up. I had already been quietly chugging along on the second one for a few months when the vast majority of people saw it, so then the second one came around a lot quicker for them than it otherwise would have. I kinda just hoped that my experience making the first two videos would somehow translate to me being able to make the next one faster, and that just didn't happen. Sometimes I look at what other solo channels are able to do in the same amount of time and just think, how? How? What's your secret, Madular? Are you an automaton? Do you have a time machine? Is it cocaine? But seriously, I don't think this channel can survive unless I figure out some way to increase my output. And it's pretty clear by now that's going to require some kind of active change in my approach. I'm sure it wouldn't hurt if I could quit my day job, but even given a pretty generous estimate of that doubling my speed, that still wouldn't even bring me close to competing. One every month just seems insane. So look, if you just want to pay for a month or two when I put out a video and then unsub until next time, I think that's understandable. I flirted on and off with the idea of releasing some quick and dirty videos in the interim, like say some musings over what I thought was actually missing from Starfield to make it so unsatisfying for so many, over mostly unedited gameplay footage. You know, back when that was a hot topic. But I figured even something like that would end up taking more time than you'd think for various reasons, and if I was going to spend all that time, it might as well be on the main video. Plus, a lot of the things I'd say in videos like that would be totally unrelated to space sims, which might annoy my audience. Or maybe I could focus on trying to work faster somehow. I don't think I have any kind of perfectionist tendencies or anything. It just takes me a long time to write all that script and edit all that video, so I don't know. Things should be better in the near term at least, because the special operations video actually will come out very soon, which I'm able to do because I cut it out of this one when I realized that what you just watched stands on its own just fine. And doing so would help get this video out faster. Shh, don't tell anyone. And assuming the pre-Wing Commander games video wins the poll, that topic seems like it would naturally lend itself to being a shorter, easier to write video. If you have any advice or thoughts, I wouldn't mind hearing it. It's a head scratcher for sure, but I'm gonna try my best to figure it out in the meantime. Alright, I'm gonna shut up now. Next video, Wing Commander 2 Special Operations 1 and 2. Coming soon. Count on it. Thanks for watching.
I will return, human.